I'd like to start tonight's special meeting for the Villanova project. This is perhaps, get us further down the path that we've been working on for quite a while. We have a lot to go over. We've discussed how to approach this. There's so much material that changes from one month to the next, and our review letters came in the last 2 days. So what I'd like to ask the applicant to address Roger's March 24th letter sort of sequentially, so that we can finally begin to say we agree, we disagree, and we're about to do that, or we have done that.
Right. And that's exactly what we intended to do. And I'll bring Alex up, and we're not going to discuss the things we agree to or will comply with. We're only going to discuss the things that we think there may be an issue or we need some discussion about, if that's okay.
So does that mean that everything else you completely agree with?
Yes, unless we're discussing it with you,
It's a will comply?
It's a will comply.
Well, can you at least do it sequentially so that, let's say, if the first thing you pick up is item 3 in zoning,
right,
then I'll know that the first 2 items you completely agree with.
Because I think some of Roger's comments are just comments, too. And, for example, he says that, this is the ordinance and it complies. Or this is the ordinance, I think, is where some of his comments are.
I can add to that. Some of my comments were for your benefit, that it was a comment before or it was a deficiency, and then I put in there that they've addressed it. I did that for your benefit.
Yeah. But I'm looking just at the last sentence of item 1 in zoning. The last 3 words are must be provided, and then
and we will comply.
Then maybe it's still better.
I'll go through everyone and say we'll comply.
What? Let's do that.
Okay, sure, that's fine.
Because I think a lot of people in the audience want a little more closure than the way we've been going. At least I do.
My one request. Skip, I have a question. Can Roger also participate in this so that we get his feedback as we go? Because it's going to be a lot to remember. Roger, if at any time after a certain comment, if you want to weigh in on it for us, if you have anything we need to know?
I have a suggestion right on that. Roger's letter is divided into areas. So at the end of an area, we'll ask staff for comment.
That'd be great, because I think it's too much to hold to the end.
And after every area every area or every other area will ask for public comment, so we don't have people forgetting what they wanted to say.
Yeah, because there's a lot to cover.
It should be a dialogue, and that's what we're going to try.
Okay, thanks.
We're going to try that.
Sure. Okay, we'll start with Roger's letter. On the first page, it's just a comment that we're seeking a waiver for the 25-foot radius curve from Ithon to Lancaster, and I know Amy has a comment about that related to discussion about the right turn lane, so we'll defer that till we talk about traffic. So starting with zoning on the housing portion of the plan. Like you said, he broke up his letter to the 4 major phases, so it goes through the housing, West Lancaster, garage, and PAC independently. So this all relates to the housing submission. Comment 1 is a will comply. We gave square footages of the building complexes. It looks like he's just asking for further breakdown for building 1A, 1B, 1C. So it's just additional square footages on the plan, so we'll comply with that. Number 2 is just, I think, a request to reorder some of the numbers in the chart. That's just a drafting issue, so we'll do that as well. That's a will comply. And number 3 is just additional background math on the math is really, it's just all parking lot area, so we'll just work with Roger on what specific numbers he wants on square footages of the independent parking area. So that's a will comply that we can work out with staff. Number 4 was a previous comment that's been addressed, and Roger's just noting that it's been, the plans have been updated, so no comment there. Number 5
we'll call those completed or done?
Right. Yep.
Okay. All right.
Number 5 has always just been an editorial comment on plan revision that was worked out through the conditional use process from the very first conditional use plans you saw to the plans that were ultimately approved under the conditional use and then submitted to land development. So that doesn't have any action required, so that's a complete comment as well. Number 6 is another editorial comment just about the changes during the process to eliminate the expansion of the health services garage and put 2 levels on the SAC garage as well. So that's a complete comment that's just editorial in nature. 7 is just asking for more information on the lighting details. So that's something we'll provide to Roger and work through with Roger. So that's a will comply. Number 8 is editorial, just stating that we provided a phasing plan and all parking is compliant during the different phases of the project, so that's no action required. Number 9 is just clarification with Roger. We got rid of the pole detail and specifically labeled the height of every individual pole on the pole schedule, so I think it's just something we want to clarify with him on where that information is located, so we can do that. That's a will comply. Number 10 is an editorial comment, no action required by Roger, so we believe that comment's addressed. And same with number 11, we'll do signage independently of the land development process when we have the sign package ready, so it's just an editorial comment.
Now, this is where we hold for staff to respond if you are largely or totally in agreement, or you disagree materially, and on which ones?
No, I have nothing on this.
Okay. And then on the Planning Commission, we can chime in if there's a particular thing.
I have 2 quick questions about this. It's not about Roger's comment. It's that I want to get to it when we go over Amy's report. I'm a placeholder for a question here with regard to comment 8. I believe I read something in one of Amy's reports that there is, during one of the phases, we have a deficit of 192 parking spots.
Yeah, I mean, we can address that now.
I don't want to address parking. Let's keep going with the letter. I just am doing a placeholder on that particular issue.
Any other board comments so far?
Yeah, go ahead.
I've got a quick question. When they're talking about addressing the parking for the users, you're also going to make sure that it's addressed for those that are working on site and the number of people that are going to be there, so they don't end up parking along Ithan Avenue or any of the other streets. I assume you've considered that, but will it be shown so that we're not surprised?
Yeah, just from a global view, if you remember on the phasing plan, when the parking garage is built, there's the northern portion of the Pike lot we call a temporary parking lot before the Performing Arts Center is built. That's anticipated to be the contractor staging area for any parking vehicles of any crew members or any staging that has to go for the construction vehicles.
Okay, so we won't see them parking along the streets there. You're not going to have pull-off areas, kind of like when people run out of room in their driveway. You're not going to be parking along the sides of the streets.
No, I mean, you're not allowed to park on Ithan or Lancaster, so
Okay.
it would be, there might be staging in West Lancaster while West Lancaster's built, but it would be within that area and vice versa.
How many vehicles can you park on that temporary parking area? Because I think I recall reading somewhere that you're going to have a couple hundred construction people on this.
Kathy, do you want to make note of that question when we go back to
We can, yeah,
Yeah, the temporary parking lot is 154 cars.
okay.
This is the best place to see it is in the housing plan set. C2.3 is the project phasing plan that has an incremental parking math through all the phases.
Okay. And the other one was, since the retail seems to have been increased to about 22,000 square feet, you will be having trucks deliver things, obviously. Where are they going to go?
No, I mean, the retail space has always been the same size.
No, it's varied.
But the loading zones were identified on the plan. There's one in the mechanical pit at Building 2C, and then there's a smaller loading dock in Building 1C, which is the 2 end caps of both buildings.
And how about, okay, I'll get into it later. I don't want to.
And then the Performing Arts Center has its own loading dock in the rear of the Performing Arts Center.
Okay, we're going to do one more section, and then we'll do a public comment, unless someone absolutely would like to speak right now.
Okay, for the Roman numeral 2 is all the subdivision land development comments. Number 1 is a drafting request. We had the zoning district shown on the detailed site plans. He just wants it on the campus-wide site plan, so that's, we can comply with that. Number 2 is once again noting the waiver we're requesting for the curb radius at the right turn from Lancaster onto Ithan. And that was presented at the last time we were here. Comment 3 is the first one we wanted to discuss.
The result of your response on comment 2 under subdivision land development is that you're going to be seeking a waiver because the statutory requirement is different from what you want.
Correct, yes. And we presented that waiver last time we were here, and it's still being requested.
And that's still subject to PennDOT input.
Correct, yes. And number 3 is an issue that we've discussed with township staff on actually various projects in the township, which we believe is a little bit of ambiguity in the code, but I guess the interpretation that staff has worked up for this has an area where you can have areas that are not drive aisles of a parking lot because you don't have parking against it, but they also they're not really an entry drive either, but there's no code standard to address that, so there's a discrepancy as to whether or not it should be 22 or 25 feet wide. The area in question is along the back of buildings 1A and 1B in this area. We're proposing that to be 22 feet wide, but there's no parking along it, and 22 feet is the standard for drive aisles with parking. Our opinion is the entry drive to the site at Church Walk is 36 feet wide. It's 3 lanes. That's greater than 25 feet. We're requesting a waiver, if it's required, from the code to allow this to remain at 22 because it's 22 through the parking that is located here, and it's 22 through the parking that's located here, and we don't want to increase the width here to give more room for increased traffic speeds. We are trying to preserve the existing trees here so the 22 feet can hold the existing edge of pavement, and if we went wider, we'd have risk of damaging some of the tree roots in that area, and just with it being 22 on both sides, it would make sense to stay consistent through that area.
Where is the exit or entrance there that is having staff say they want it to be 25 feet there?
Well, the entry drive is actually on the next sheet, but it's on a different turn set. So going to, this is the overall campus plan. This is Church Walk, the relocated, and that's 3 lanes wide at 36 feet. And then you come in, and then there's 19 parking spots for a SEPTA parking lot that we have to maintain for the station. Then you get to what we'll call an unloaded driveway with no parking on it. And then you get into the parking lot again with 22 feet there. So it's 36 and then 22 as permissible by code. Then we're trying to maintain the 22, and then once it gets into the parking, it's 22, which is permissible by code. So it's a question as to whether or not this would even count as a 25-foot wide entry and exit drive. It's really kind of a void in the code, but we'd just like to maintain the 22-foot to be consistent.
When you say make a list.
Okay. I'm going to make a suggestion to skip and then see what the board thinks. With regard to the items on the review sheets that we're going to do, if there's an item that the applicant wants to discuss, how does it work for staff and for the rest of us? If we have somebody over there make a list. Peter, I think we did this back when we actually did CICD. We had lists of things and we kind of went back to them and handled a few discussions all at once.
That's fine, I can do that.
Okay, so what does everybody think about here? Rather than making a decision or trying to delve into the deep right now on every one of the specific items that the applicant would like to discuss, if we take a list of them and then talk about them in a little bit, maybe we can be more efficient.
Well, I think we're going to be able to get right back to this because we're going to have staff input right at the end of this section.
Right, but as a process for if there's a bunch of these in the next section, for instance, that's all I'm saying. Think about it, but
I also have them all noted, so if we want to run through everything, then I can circle back. I have everyone
Great.
starred, so
Okay.
All right.
we can
Well, then he
we can hit
already
those
has
highlights.
super.
So we went through subdivision land development, comment 3. Comment 4 is editorial, just that the appropriate number of street trees have been provided, so there's no action required for that. Number 5 and 6 are just identifying that the park and rec fee requirements exist. So that's editorial comments as well. Number 7,
Well, no, that could be a will comply.
right, yeah.
We have a question about that. There's a discrepancy on the calculation.
Yeah. Well, we can raise that at the end of the section. We'll have commission comment.
Yeah, I can mark number 6 as well.
So are you saying 5 and 6 are will comply?
I think
but I
there's a
mean, from the-
disconnect on how the math is done that we can discuss, but
We're doing the fee in lieu of the dedication.
Right, but the comment here, the way we're looking at these two items, you're going to comply with the way Roger's looking at them?
Yes.
well, Roger
comply.
doesn't have the math, but
Yeah, he doesn't have what the fee is down yet, but we will, it's 4,000 square feet of building area and it's $3,307. We don't dispute that. That's what the
Okay,
ordinance requires.
that's, okay.
If I can add something to that, maybe to clear it up. Right now, staff and the solicitor are reviewing the existing ordinance for an interpretation as to how you do the actual calculation. There's a slight difference of opinion of how that is calculated. We're working on that now, which is why I pulled the actual numbers out of my review. They have to do one of those two things. They're mandated by ordinance to do that.
And for the public's benefit, I think you've just said that you are going to pursue the fee in lieu.
correct.
Okay.
So that's 5 and 6. Number 7 is just comments about the Township Fire Marshal review. We have met with the Township Fire Marshal and discussed hydrant location and water service locations. He was acceptable to our approach during that meeting, so we await any further comments he has on the plans. We can address if there's any additional comments.
So we will say that's a will comply, but it's not quite closed.
Yeah, it's a will comply. We haven't received any additional
I mean,
comments.
you know, he could have some onerous requirements, and then you'd have to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean,
but-
we'd have to review whatever comments he makes.
Okay.
But we'd work with him based on what he...
Okay. Now, at any moment in time, I want to caution everybody on the commission that you can discuss this further. I'm not trying to make this go through at a pell-mell rate, but we have seen all this about 4 or 5 times, so I am trying to clear away what seems to be cleared up. But if anybody has an issue, you know, that's fine, and at that moment in time, which is now, you can make some comments about this section if you like.
Yeah, I have comments on 2 of them, but do we want to hear from Roger first?
All right, yep, okay, let's do that. I think we
I would
sort of heard-
prefer to just respond to your questions.
Okay, I guess my comments are with number 2 and 3, the waivers that are requested. And in my view, those are requirements that are safety in nature. They're not aesthetics. The radii for the turn there, as well as the 22 feet, being consistent with a parking area of 22 feet. You have a lot of room at the end of the parking stalls that you won't have in the other section. So that only gives 11 feet each way. If you have trees there and they're over the line over the curb and into the drive space, it could restrict it further. So I don't know that that's going to be an issue there because of the speed being so slow, but the only valid argument that I heard is that you wanted to maintain the trees. I don't think being consistent with the other aisles really applies. Does everyone follow that? Because where you have the parking spots, you have more than 22 feet, really.
Right. Actually,
More than 25.
Yeah. I wanted to hear, I believe this was, Roger, I know this was your comment, but has Amy weighed in on this one as well? Yes or no?
It is part of our comments, and we had
That's what
discussed
I
it with
thought I
them.
read it in
Yes.
yours as well, right.
Yes.
It's a code issue. It's not an opinion. It's a code
No, I know
issue.
that. She mentioned it as well. Yes. My question to both of you is, and why I'm directing this kind of to Amy is, one of my concerns is that if the entrance and exit drive is only 22 feet, have they given you any turning radii for the trucks that will be making deliveries out there and trying to get onto South Ethan Avenue?
My understanding is that they would not be making that turn onto South Ethan.
That's also not the area that we're discussing.
Oh,
The area between the two parking sections that's linked by what they're proposing, 22 instead of 25.
Yeah, the area in question is this area, and it's actually a straight turn. I mean, it's a long radius curve, but there's no actual turning movement through that portion.
So the turn there, the intersection, you're providing the 25.
There is no intersection here. This is going under the pedestrian bridge. The intersection's not till you get to Church Walk, which is off the page. This is just a straight, you're just driving along the parking lot. There's just no parking stalls there.
Yeah, what looks like an intersection there actually is the bridge overhead.
Yeah, that's area that used to be owned by, that's just a property line.
Susan, are you
That's what
referring to
Church Walk
comment
used to
2
be.
or 3?
I was talking about 3 because I thought we were talking about an actual exit.
Okay, 3 is the area that Alex just pointed out behind the buildings where you come off of Church Walk and you take the road that goes behind the dormitories. That's what
Correct.
that comment refers
And
to.
you want to have it be 22 feet all the way out to where?
Well, the Church Walk is over 25, and the intersection with Ethan is over 25. But once you get into the site, it's
Got it.
parking, and then there's a part where the parking goes away, and then parking starts again. We're trying to we don't want to widen the section that's
Yeah,
in between two parking lots.
I believe it's 25 off of Ethan into
Okay.
the parking area.
I thought the
It goes
issue
down
was-
to 22, and then what the code says is once you leave that parking area and it's only roadway, it has to go back to 25. They're requesting to not have that go back out to 25.
That made it more clear, thank you.
Well, Roger, while we have you on that spot, is it your recommendation that we not grant a waiver or not recommend to grant a waiver?
I don't have a recommendation one way or the other. I'm just stating what the code says.
And Amy, no?
for the 22 feet, I don't have a problem with the 22-foot, in my own opinion.
And just for reference, some of the lanes in Lancaster Avenue are 11 feet wide. So a 22-foot is two 11-foot lanes. That's the lane widths of some of Route 30.
Yeah, but aren't they going to, you're suggesting, something here suggested they were going to widen those lanes.
Well, the outside lane is 12 and the inside lane is 11.
I guess maybe
you.
my question to you is this. Given that, and I hear what Roger's saying, he is simply stating the code, and he's saying it must be revised or a waiver requested. So I guess my question to the applicant would be, why didn't you just request the waiver? You asked for a waiver on something that we're giving you much more pushback on, i.e. number 2.
There was a debate between us and the applicant on the interpretation of the code.
So that is the reason
So
the
you're getting my
applicant's-
version of the interpretation, not theirs.
You are staff, I understand that, so my commentary to the applicant is, I'm surprised that you didn't just seek the waiver, since it didn't appear to be that staff was opposed to it. That was my only
Yeah,
comment.
this is a drive lane in between two parking lots, so I don't view it as an entry drive, which the standard for an entry drive is 25 feet. So we disagreed on whether or not a waiver was required. We're just asking for the waiver.
Oh, you are asking for the waiver?
Yes.
So that's a second waiver,
Yes, that's a second one.
right?
Correct.
Okay. Do we have other board comment before we go to the public?
Yes, number 2, that is Ethan Avenue, correct?
Correct.
As I understand it. Yeah. I'm not for that. I think that's a tight turn to make onto a road that really should be widened, which is another issue maybe we'll get to. But I definitely would not grant a waiver there. I would not be in favor of granting a waiver.
I'm also not in favor of that waiver.
Well, we could do a mini vote, just not with a resolution at this point, just, I'm getting the sense that everybody's opposed to it. Is there anybody in favor of it?
This waiver was requested without, I know this right turn lane is still in contention here, but they're asking for a 25 with the turn lane or without the
No,
turn lane?
without the turn lane.
Then I'm definitely not in favor.
So I would say that initially, if this were the only issue outstanding, that we are opposed to that, granted that waiver. But I also understand there'll be additional discussion with PennDOT about this, too.
Correct. Yeah, and we've done the turning radiuses, the truck can make the turning movement, and it's in the existing condition, it's only 15 to 18-foot radius, and it's being improved to 25, so it's better than it is. The reason we don't want to go to 35 is because it either lengthens the crosswalk or pushes the stop bar and the crosswalks further west. And we're trying to keep as close to the existing condition with pedestrian crossing times as we can. And we feel with the 25-foot, you can get a good crosswalk alignment, a good length, and still leave room for the truck turns.
However, since you're pulling a lot of the students down to the bridge, you'll have supposedly fewer students there. So I would say let the students move faster or lengthen it and...
It's controlled by the PennDOT design standard, so we have to use the crossing speed.
Kathy, the thing is, they can move the crosswalk to
And-
where it's narrower. They
Yeah.
don't need to lengthen the time for
So
the
I think
crosswalk.
there's ways of dealing it aesthetically. Again, it might not be what you prefer, but I think we need to look at the traffic safety since there's so many cars that
No.
go down Lancaster.
We understand.
Another thing to consider, part of the reason you're worried about doing the crosswalk length time is because you don't want the traffic to back up. But one of the reasons traffic backs up right there is because people have to slow down so much to make a right-hand turn on 9th and Avenue that it starts backing up behind there. So, I mean...
That's why I'm opposed.
I drive it several times a day, so, I mean, it does back up. So if you are draining the people and you're getting that out, then let the crosswalk be 2-3 seconds longer. There's not going to be any cars sitting there.
Right, and it is an improvement over the existing radius, but we understand your position.
Okay, under the rules that I sort of set forth at the beginning, we are at a stage where I would like to invite the public to comment as to just these sections, subdivision, land development, and zoning. Does anyone wish to speak?
Skip, if they don't speak at this time, they can still
That's
speak on
true.
these issues later
Yes.
if they would prefer.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not foreclosing all public comment on these issues. We just discussed it. We know a couple little hot spots. Let's start up.
Rick Leonardi, Alden Lane. Just to clarify, the waiver number 2 for the 25-foot radius, they're asking for a radius that's 10 feet deficient from standard, right? 10 whole feet. Okay, I'm obviously opposed. There is the truck turning templates that have been published so far that are available on the website show that any truck coming around that corner is going to be impinging on its lane to the left. It will be in that lane. The only way that a semi-trailer can actually finish the turn onto Ithan is if the left turn stop bar for northbound Ithan is pushed significantly back away from the intersection. This will shorten the storage lane coming out of the garage. And God forbid anybody should cheat on that stop bar and actually impinge on the intersection, which I know here in Radnor we never do. So I think that radius needs to be even greater than 35 feet, frankly, if not, if a right turn lane is not provided. I don't know if there's a proper place to put this, but insofar as we spoke, there was a brief mention of Villanova's plans about parking and about the St. Augustine garage versus Bartley. If I could just read something very quickly about this and get it on the record. Villanova now admits that the Bartley Health Center garage cannot be amended. This was brought out in the 2008 master plan, and it's, finally they've admitted it. They've also now concluded that the only sensible thing is to add dimension and capacity to the St. Augustine garage. Were the St. Augustine garage rebuilt as a proper garage, and a lot of you probably in your mind's eye are picturing a parking garage with internal ramping and up-down circulation and all that kind of stuff. St. Augustine garage is not that way. It's two levels that do not communicate with each other. It is, in essence, no different, frankly, than the health center garage, only it's better built. The only way to make a third level or a fourth level, which is now being proposed, is if St. Augustine Center is demolished, frankly, and start over with a proper design with up-down circulation and ramping. If this was rebuilt as a proper garage with internal ramping, it could easily serve as VU's main parking facility. If you went 4 or 5 levels, for example, you'd still be below the eye line of the St. Augustine Center itself, which is 5 stories plus a roof line. It would be invisible, frankly, from any neighbor that cared. It could serve as VU's main parking facility. Located adjacent to the R5 line, the site is unsuited for classrooms or dorm space. It's accessed by 2 driveways from 320 and 1 from Ithan. All 3 of them already gate controlled. Its location would be handier for staff. It'd be close to the pavilion and stadium. It's currently used for invitation-only parking for special events. Could, as was pointed out at the last meeting, warehouse, to use that term, a great many student cars in such a fashion as to discourage their casual use. It's worth noting again just how many of this project's planning difficulties stem from the original decision to build a 1,400-car garage on minor collector Ithan Avenue at Pike Lot. That single choice drives 1, the widening of Lancaster at Chapel Drive to 70 feet, the construction of a completely new roadway in back of the dorms, 3, the creation of a partially blind 4-way intersection on Ithan, 4, the widening of Ithan to 3+ lanes ending very suddenly at a choke point at the P&W Bridge, 5, the ongoing wrangle over the right turn lane from Lancaster onto Ithan, 6, the redesign, retiming of the Ithan-Lancaster intersection that will occur even without this right turn lane, 7, the requirement by last meeting for 5 police officers to manage event parking, and now 8, the addition of a new right turn lane east of Ithan, wrapping the Performing Arts Center in traffic and further pinching its already constricted plaza. The solution here is obvious. Reduce by, say, half the capacity of Pike Garage. Transfer that capacity to the St. Augustine Garage. Use them in tandem to store and to circulate traffic. Thanks.
Thank you. Additional public comment? Board comment? There was a lot of issues there. Well, I guess we can get back to all that.
I guess I have a question is, when the traffic is analyzed, at any point was that part of the proposal? Looking at putting more of the parking up there?
You're asking if we directed an applicant to...
Yeah, did we ever ask them to look at reducing the amount of storage at the proposed garage and put it?
I believe we did in the beginning, and that's where they came up with the second, or the additional levels in 2 of the garages on campus in response to asking for some of that
That's why they
parking to
looked
be
at it
removed from there.
in the first place was because we
Correct.
asked.
If I
Okay.
remember correctly, it's been a few years, but I'm pretty certain
Okay.
that was...
That is correct.
Okay.
I think the original
Thanks.
Pike garage is reduced. The current plan is smaller than the first.
Yes, and everything was moved onto campus to try and get some of those
But
employees
not
to
small
be
enough.
on campus. So I believe that they made sure that some of those employees were on campus rather than being across Lancaster.
All that may be true, but the fact of the matter from the public's point of view, what happened was that the Pike Garage was deemed to be too tall. A level was taken off, and the concession was that levels would be added to Bartley and St. Augustine Garage. It was purely an aesthetic decision. Whether or not this sort of shotgun approach actually entered anybody's mind, I think is extremely dubious to me.
Well, just to respond to your comment, though, the garage is smaller. And so one of the side effects, possibly beneficial side effects, is a
well, we're
little bit
down-
less traffic.
We're down from 1,400 to what, 1,300?
I
That's
think
still a
it's
lot for a minor
1,200 or
collector.
so. But we'll ask the applicant in a
Yeah.
second to clarify the reduction. And also, we want the applicant to come back up and,
Yeah, just to address, I just went over with Alex as to the numbers. Currently, on the Pike in the main lot, there are 1,700 parking spaces. With this proposal, there will be 1,289, so a reduction of over 400 parking spaces, and an additional Of those 1289, 700 of them are for storage of permanent students, of resident students.
And the other question I just asked was, what was the size of Pike before we took the,
1,800 when it was the very first garage that was reduced, it was originally 1,800 cars.
so we've gone, on that basis, then you could say we went from 1,800 to 1,289?
Correct.
The garage isn't that big, right? 1289 is all.
No, 1,289 is the garage.
So you're down 25%.
From the very first plan?
From that original submission, correct.
Okay.
However, I don't think we can count on 500 cars being warehoused there because I suggested at the last meeting that that probably isn't the best place to warehouse cars. You're looking at it from a traffic standpoint. I'm looking at it from what happens in real life, and people, especially if they're going to the theater or they have an event at the theater, they're going to want closer parking than way on the other side of the campus. So just because they're saying now they're going to warehouse students' cars there doesn't mean that a year from now or 2 years from now or 5 years from now they're going to be warehousing student cars there. So I don't think we can count on it. I think we have to think about the big traffic picture.
The other thing that I think the public is trying to say and has been trying to say for a couple of years is this: that portion of the township already feels like they are taking on a great burden in, a very changed view shed, the garage, extra traffic, the dorm. I mean, that part, that neighborhood behind all of that is taking, what 100% of this development. And I think what the public is trying to say is, given that the SAC garage, which if you ever drive up there, you'll see it's all actually down below, that is a very logical place for Villanova to put a very great number of cars that would have very little visual impact to the neighbors on Ashwood and I forget the other road over there. Very little, none probably because it's down, right? And would have tremendous positive impact to the part of our township that's taking on the huge, impact of the CICD. And it's a larger road, 320, so I think they think it's a logical place to put more cars closer to the highway, all sorts of reasons. But at the end of the day, I think they're trying to say, Villanova, can you, share the love around the campus a little with the cars? I think that's what they're really trying to say. And the reduction is a reduction. That's great. I think the neighbors probably view it that, why aren't there just 400 or 500 cars over at Pike and all that other, put all that student, overflow, supply the parking for the art center, which is what Kathy continues to truly believe is what's going to happen there eventually at Pike, and some that would help with the the pavilion, whatever. But put the students on the other side of campus, which would actually, by the way, increase the likelihood that the students will walk and won't use their cars if they're not right there near the dorms.
Well, the applicant could comment on that.
Yeah, the only comment that I have is if we're going to put more layers on St. Augustine, it would require us to go to the zoning hearing board, and we're not going to the zoning hearing board. We're just not going to do it. This has taken too long. This process has been a very long process, and we've avoided going to the zoning hearing board. This whole plan is about not having to proceed there. We really do not intend to go to the zoning hearing board.
Is your by right, how many layers at that spot? How many new layers?
How many
Two
we
more?
do? Two additional or two additional?
Staff
It's two
agree
now,
with
it's
that?
two
Has staff looked at whether or not they could go to 6 without going to zoning? They don't have to go, or they do have to go?
They do.
Okay.
However, Villanova went to zoning to get a variance on the law school building, which was given because of the philosophy of it being back in there, tucked in the campus, and there are other tall buildings there. So I think putting aside, you've spent too much time on this already, well, that's not our fault. And we need to live with this forever, as do you. And it just seems to make more sense to put the parking where it's not impacting on the neighborhoods. It's more accessible. It's more centrally located on the campus. So I think it has good benefits for you as well as the township and traffic flow and everything. And I don't think it's an impossible task to get a variance on that for those reasons.
Is the SAC garage, as it's currently designed to have whatever you're going to be adding to it, have you maxed it to the amount that you absolutely can without going to zoning, or is there still more there you could do?
The SAC garage with the 2 additional levels is hard up against the height limit for zoning. One more level would put it above that, the height.
I have a question. I can appreciate that after all this time, you don't want to have a potential delay in terms of going before the zoning hearing board. However, the project is phased over how many years will this take? 4 or 5? To finish this, all 4 phases, maybe longer?
Yes.
Couldn't you start? I mean, couldn't you do it concurrently? And if it's turned down, you already have something in hand here. I mean, it's not, that you don't need a waiver to do the.
See, if zoning turned us down, then the whole project goes kaput. So that's.
No. Why would it? No. I don't see how that is the case.
The parking requirements. We
No.
have to meet the
You
parking
already have a by
requirements.
right to do what you want to do with the garage now. You can add the 2 layers. Yes.
Yes.
Somebody had their 2 fingers up. All I'm saying is, why not find out simultaneously if you could have a 3rd layer?
We have made many concessions on this issue regarding the parking structure and on Ethan Avenue. We understand the neighbors' concerns. We understand all your concerns. This is our plan. It's a good plan. We've reduced the parking at that structure by 400 than what currently exists today in this area. We think that, that the plan complies. Obviously, the plan complies with all the zoning requirements. This is the plan we're proposing to the board. And Skip, through this process, one thing you learn is what can go wrong does go wrong. And that's what's happened in 4 years we've been through this. I really cannot advise my client to take this matter to the zoning hearing board.
I guess I fail to understand the risk of a side-by-side approach.
You want to address it? Go ahead.
Just a couple additional logistical issues with additional levels onto it beyond the issue of the
Zoning.
the zoning height. The number of parking spaces in the main garage is roughly 300 per level. The SAC footprint can accommodate about 125, 130 parking spaces per level. Please don't quote me on the numbers, these are rough. So in order to take out 1 level of the SAC, of the Pike garage, we would need to add 3 levels to the SAC.
Unless the footprint of the Pike garage was just slightly smaller. In other words, instead of 300 per level, it was 275 per level.
Well, we'd still be looking to displace the same number of parking spaces.
I understand. I meant if the net effect is that you go from 1289 to 1189 or 1230, then those other cars could be in the SAC garage, if that was approved.
If that.
I mean, you're still building from
With that
scratch.
bridge.
You're still building the Pike garages from scratch.
Well, the Pike garage, as currently being designed, is done as an addition.
Right.
And it's being done as 2 additional levels on top of the structure that is there using an internal ramp system. So it's as efficient as it would be if it was being taken down and built back up. So we're not gaining any efficiency. In that regard, we're actually more efficient right now because if it was built all at the single point of entry with an entirely internal ramp, then we would have that ramp extending down into the lower level, which could, it would probably be roughly the same amount now I'm thinking about, but it could potentially impact the number of parking spaces in it. So each additional level goes up, from memory, about 10 foot, 8 inches for the clearances for structure and the required clearances underneath.
Question, where in the construction phasing is the Pike garage? Is that in the 1st phase, 2nd phase, 4th phase?
The Pike garage is phase 2, the SAC garage is phase 1.
Okay, well, we may recommend it, but I guess you don't have to do it. Let's do stormwater.
Roman numeral 3, number 1 is a typo where we hit 9 instead of 6, so all the values should be 6216. So the 9216 is just a typo. So we'll address that in the report. That's a will comply. And comment number 2, we disagree with the calculation. The comment says you need to dewater the 100-year condition in 4 days. The code standard is the infiltration volume has to be dewatered in 4 days. So it's a different standard, and we comply with the code requirement of the infiltration volume within 4 days. And that's the only 2 comments for that section.
Would you explain to me how that, run that past me again? I didn't quite follow.
The code requires, we've discussed all this, whether or not we're doing volume treatment for 1 inch or 1.5 inch. So whatever volume we agree to capture and do volume control on infiltration or whatever other feature, that has to be used up in 4 days. It has to be able to drain through that basin in 4 days. That's the standard in the code. The comment is saying that the 100-year condition exceeds beyond 4 days, but there's no standard that the 100-year condition has to dewater in less than 4 days. So we disagree with the comment.
Okay, this is one of those moments where we ask staff who's right here.
We'll work it out.
Oh. Okay. General comments?
General comments is we acknowledge that a 537 plan is required, and we're working on that, so that's a will comply. And then asking for some additional gate and fencing enclosures for the loading dock at Building 1C. So we'll update that detail as well. That's a will comply.
Okay, board comment on these 2 sections?
My only comment is that I kind of want to have a bigger stormwater management conversation all at one time, after we get through the comment stuff. That's all.
I think if Alex wants to, I don't know if you're prepared to do this, but if you could take them the 10,000-foot level of how you're complying with stormwater for the entire site, it may head off a bunch of smaller, detailed questions.
Yeah, do we want to get through the letter and then just do a stormwater discussion?
I would recommend you do it now so that we don't get hung up on each section. I want to show how it all works together.
Actually, let me just grab some papers. Wow. And I guess just high level for some background on stormwater. We have met multiple times with DEP and some of the involved neighbors and the Delaware River Keeper. The most recent meeting was just last week, and worked through kind of what we've proposed, what we've designed, and those meetings have all been very productive and very successful. I think all the stakeholders at those meetings is in agreement with our approach and agrees that we've delivered on what we've been asked to do and is comfortable with our plan moving forward. And it complies with all the requirements of the code, goes above and beyond the code to the greatest extent we can do so, and would meet all the permitting requirements for that. Globally, there's 3 major drainage areas for the property. West Lancaster is in one of them. It drains west down towards 320. The housing and the front half of the Pike Garage drain into Ithan Avenue, and then the rear half of the garage and some of the Performing Arts Center drains east into the Pike Field, into the stormwater system that was built for the softball field improvements at that time. What we've agreed to do is, as we discussed previously, the housing uses a variety of rain gardens, stormwater cisterns to store water that's reused in the cooling towers, and then the required detention basins for peak rate control, and they also include an infiltration component to handle the volume there. All those features for the housing portion control about 1.7 inches of runoff from that property, and then also meet the requirements of the Township Code for flood control for detention. So with the improvements of the reduction in impervious, all the volume control we're doing, and the peak rate control, there'll be a drastic reduction in volume and rate of stormwater going down Ethan Avenue as a result of the development as opposed to the earlier condition. Same for West Lancaster Avenue. The parking has infiltration basins and detention basins as well. That treats the 1-inch requirement for stormwater. I believe it's slightly higher. I believe it's in the 1.2 range, and meets the volume requirements we agreed to and the peak rate requirements we agreed to. So once again, from the existing condition, there will be a reduction in flow going into to the west of the property in that location. And then on the eastern half of the property by the Pike Field, we're reusing the existing system that was built for the Pike Garage and doing some internal modifications to improve its efficiency. So that will treat the 1-inch of runoff as it was originally designed and the peak rate control for that area. And what we've agreed to do above and beyond at Commissioner Fisher's recommendation and some concerns, global discussions, and during the West End Zone project, there was concern about a PennDOT pipe that cuts from the low point in Route 30 in front of the stadium, drains through the softball field, and discharges back by the railroad. As part of this project, we've agreed to pick up that pipe, provide volume and peak rate control for the PennDOT, existing PennDOT flow that's not part of our project. We've agreed to go above and beyond, capture that flow, and provide code-compliant stormwater for that as well. So we believe we've put together a very strong stormwater package, addressed all the concerns. Roger can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe all the stakeholders from the neighborhood and from the meetings we've had are satisfied with what we've done, and we believe we have a good plan.
Question, how much of the water is coming from the stadium area, the pipe that's going under the thing right now?
It's really just from the front wall out. The majority of that flow is really PennDOT flow for the whole roadway itself. It drains from Blackfriar and Ethan Avenue towards the center to a low point for the whole 50-foot wide section, drains into 2 pipes, and then it's just piped through the field and gets dumped out by the railroad. So we're picking up that flow. There is some portion of the stadium that drains out over the curb line and flows into the site.
Okay, but the rest of the stadium goes north.
North, yeah.
All right. So you're basically picking up the water off of Lancaster Avenue and a little
Yeah, we're
bit in
agreeing
front
to
of that.
pick up the PennDOT flow and treat it.
Are you treating it for water quality or just peak and volume?
Well, we're putting in a mechanical filter for maintenance of the system, an infiltration facility in the bottom of the system, and pipes for peak rate detention control.
And you know you can achieve infiltration there? You've done the testing?
We're still doing the testing. It's a new system, so we're still exploring that.
If you find you don't have any infiltration there, what's your next step?
Well, in some areas, we've looked at over-excavating and replacing poor soils, which is one option we'd explore. And then some other options are using it as a cistern and recirculating it through some rain gardens or something that we can put. There's a vegetated swale along the eastern property line. There's some options to recirculate that water through some rain gardens there if we absolutely have to.
And the filter you're talking about, is that like a manufactured treatment device?
Yeah, like a Vortec or
Okay.
something. We're just concerned since it's PennDOT flow, we want to get some of
Well,
that.
it's coming off the road, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Where else that you're providing water quality?
We're using the same filter for the Pike Field system. That doesn't have any pretreatment now. So
Right
we're
now
adding
it's
that
going right, okay.
into that. And the housing, everything goes through rain gardens beforehand. So
Right.
the rain gardens do a lot of that pretreatment.
So, Roger, you asked us to address this now. Did you have comments you wanted to add to Alex?
No, I just agree that what Alex mentioned earlier, that I believe all the stakeholders that have been involved with the DEP meetings are satisfied with the steps that Villanova is taking somewhat over and above our ordinance to address some of the issues there.
Okay, do we have board comment further? Okay.
And if I could add, I'm sorry, if I could add one more thing. A majority of the comments that I have in my letter that revolve around the stormwater that we discussed here are mostly housekeeping issues that Alex and I can work through. There's nothing in there that's really like anybody's missing the boat. It's just every project we go through the little tweaking and the massaging the numbers.
So the reason I said I wanted to comment later is a neighbor reached out to me and said that they had had a really good meeting with you, and that they were really, really happy with the, I think she said that you guys, really want to wow our township with the stormwater, management. So I was happy. This was one that I was going to be happy to hear about. And I think my only comment is you'll work out with staff, whatever wording we need to make sure that everybody's clear exactly what everybody's expectations were with regard to your intention and your plans and all the things that you're looking to achieve. And I think, Regina, you asked, that's your expertise. It's not mine. I just know that I did hear that the neighbors, were very pleased with your intention, and the above and beyond is exactly the kind of thing we've been, needing you guys to do to help us with stormwater. So thank you. And thank you, Roger, for working on that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate that comment, and the last meeting went very well, so we were happy with it.
Did the public have anything they wanted to say at this point? And again, of course, there'll be opportunities later, but
But the issues are stormwater.
it was stormwater and general comments, stormwater management and general comments, as to housing. Okay, now, then, ready, Alex? No.
On to West Lancaster parking.
Okay.
Number one for the zoning comment, that's just an editorial comment that there's some existing nonconformities for the location of the existing buildings that are just being preserved, and it's just a preservation of a nonconformity, so there's no action needed there. Comment under subdivision, comment 1 is a bookkeeping item with Roger. We have to go through those numbers in a little bit more detail and clarify where the calculations are, but we can get him a revised plan to clarify that item. Numbers 2 through 5 are ones that we do want to talk about, and they relate mostly to existing nonconformities on existing parking lots on the campus that we aren't modifying and are preserving. The first comment is talking about the parking lot design standards in the Stone and Farrell Hall parking areas, which is generally in this area. This is C2.1, sheet 5 of 28 of the WLA plan set. The limit of our improvements, we're building this right in, right out driveway. We're connecting to this drive lane here, and there's an existing parking lot here that we're slightly expanding to the rear. But everything west of basically this intersection is all the existing condition that we aren't touching and aren't modifying. So all the comments related to the Stone and Farrell Hall dimensional standards are all existing conditions that we aren't including as part of the scope of this project.
I have one question about that, actually. Did I just hear you say that you are tying into that lot right there?
Well, if you remember, we're closing all the driveways on the original.
No, I understand that.
So we are offering access onto this driveway from these two
Right,
lots.
so Roger, my question to you, isn't that a perfect example of an exit or an entrance, and shouldn't that be 25 feet? It's marked, it's dimensioned as 22.
It could be. We'll have to take a further look at that.
So you'll take a look at that,
Yeah.
okay.
Our comments on this were for the overall parking facility. Now that they're stating that they're maintaining a lot of this, we'll take a second look at this and look at what needs to be done.
You're going to look at it twice. To paraphrase what I think you just said, you're going to look at it again. You're taking into account that some of the parking isn't changing, but by the same token, you are going to review the fact that there's a new entrance being created to this parking area, and you'll evaluate whether or not it should be 25.
Exactly.
Okay.
If it is supposed to be 25, we'll do what?
Once again, I think the code's a little ambiguous here. To me, an entry driveway is an entry to a public street. This is internal driveway circulation. I don't know that 3 feet here makes any difference. I'll work out with Roger, and if he wants an extra 3 feet, we can explore if we can provide that.
In the language in the code where it defines an entry driveway, it does refer to arterials and the different levels of streets. So I may tend to agree with Alex on this one, that since it's coming from an internal drive, it may not be 25. But again, we've had a debate on this on numerous projects, so that'll continue.
Is this section curbed the whole way?
We're curbing that entrance drive, but then once you get into the parking lots, some of the parking areas are just edge of pavement without curbing.
The connector section, is that curbed?
We are curbing this entrance drive, and then these radius returns are curbed.
Okay.
And then the curbing stops.
And then how about going down? Is that also?
Going this way,
No, towards the bottom.
all the new parking is curbed. Everything in this area is all curbed.
Yeah, because that's where, I mean, if it wasn't curbed and it was a smaller, then there's always somewhere to go. There's really nowhere to go. You have no it's not like a roadway where you have an 11-foot lane and then you have a shoulder. There's no shoulder. The curb's right there. I mean, are you just trying to minimize pavement? What's the goal?
I mean, my position is this is not an entry drive. You're inside a parking lot and you're traveling through a drive lane. You know, I think the code is a little bit, it's lacking in clarifying exactly what an entry drive is. You know, that it's 22 feet past those parking stalls and then the parking stalls disappear. To me, that doesn't automatically make it an entry drive.
So it's more about the issue that you think you've met the requirements.
Yeah, and I mean, in this area is another area where that's a slope up to the property line. If we added another 3 feet, we'd probably end up losing a good number of the trees we're trying to save along that rear
It's
buffer.
good to know. It's good to know the logic behind
Yeah,
it.
there's a lot of trees there that we're trying to maintain.
But back for a moment to the other side, the entry to that largely continuing parking. It seems to me that you might want to take into account deliveries to those two buildings that are not cars. And that's a reason perhaps to have that 3 feet put in there.
I mean, I'll discuss with Villanova, but I believe these are very limited. These are facility only. This is public safety, and this is facilities management. They're very low turnover, very low use driveways, and it's no public access. It's all university staff that's been using those buildings for a number of years.
But, you know, I don't know how wide the driveways were, or what the radius was coming in off of Lancaster to service them now.
They're single-family driveways. They're very narrow.
Okay. We're back on deck.
So let's see. So number 3 is the same standard with Stone and Farrell. Number 4 and 5 relate to the visitor parking lot, which is a different area. But it's still the same discussion. The visitor lot, all we're doing on the visitor lot is cutting off the front half of it to continue this sidewalk and build Church Walk, and then building a new driveway behind it. This parking area is all the existing parking lot. We're not touching the grading, we're not rebuilding it. We're literally saw cutting one end and saw cutting the other and connecting roadways to it. So the items noted are existing nonconformities of that lot that we're maintaining.
Alex, which page?
This is 2.1. This is of the Church Walk and Bridge plan.
Oh.
It's also shown on the composite plan of any of the plan sheets. It would be on C 2.0 of all the other plan sets.
So the configuration is remaining as is today?
Yeah, we're literally keeping the visitor parking lot and cutting off 2 ends of it and
It's not like
reconnecting roadways.
it's not like you're restriping it or anything. It's exactly as.
Other than, I mean, yeah, other than a maintenance project years down the road where they seal coat it and restripe it. I mean, the one thing we are providing with the improved circulation, we are putting landscape islands at the 2 end caps just to define the circulation patterns that aren't there today. So we are adding 2 landscape islands, but there are other areas that have more than 10 parking spots in a row without an island that we're maintaining.
So that was 4 and 5?
Yeah, both. 4 is 10 parking spots in a row without a curb island, and then number 5 relates to it being over 30 cars, so it wants a 10-foot wide center island which we can't provide in the width that's there today.
6.
And then
6.
number 6 is an issue that we'll discuss with Roger. What we did here to solve this issue, if you notice on this plan, this is C2.1 of the WLA plan set. The parking garage or the parking lot layout standard is 22-foot center drive aisles with parking on either side. Because of this backup provision that he's noting here, we've actually gone 28.5 feet. So we believe there's sufficient room for the car just to back up straight and turn around. We'll discuss it with Roger. We'll work out if he wants it to be narrowed to 22, then we can take these 3 parking spots and bump them further back into the woods and put a hammerhead on. It's, you know, we'll discuss with him to make sure he's comfortable with the circulation there, but it's a will comply in some form or another.
So I think we'll go on and do the stormwater piece as well, and then we'll have comments from staff, et cetera.
Once again, with the stormwater, comment 1 is a typo on our point, but it doesn't affect any of the critical calculations on that plan. It's just a wrong number in one portion of a chart, so we can update that.
And I would recommend, a lot, like I said before, a lot of these stormwater comments are housekeeping comments or us working through some of the particulars of the design. So I don't know that we need to get real deep into this stuff.
Yeah. Globally, we don't have any major issues with stormwater other than we'll work out all the details with Roger. We can clarify some calculations for him and clean up some numbers that he noticed. And we can...
To summarize, you basically are
Complying with all of it, basically.
Yeah, we'll
You have no
address-
issue with any of his
Yeah,
comments?
we'll address all Roger's concerns and work through the specifics with him and his staff.
And Roger, you're on board. You just seemed to be on board a moment ago.
Yes,
so.
and I can remind the board also that once this is all said and done and they have final approval, they still have to come back through me for a grading permit for each one of these facilities that they put in, which again is another step in the review process.
See, one of the issues I have, I just happened to look at 7, is that you were bringing up the fact that the runoff from the pedestrian bridge isn't really fully addressed. So for them to say, we'll work it out is great, but we're not getting an opportunity to review that, and you aren't either at this point. So, I mean, it seems to me there's opportunities to disagree coming out of this as well as make it all work, but...
But the bottom line is, if they don't meet the ordinance, they don't move forward, and that's what I ensure that they do. So,
Well, the other thing is, too, any approval would be conditioned upon meeting your comments. I would assume you would agree to that.
Yeah, we would agree.
Typically,
Other than the items we've asked the waivers on.
In
or
this
noted.
section of stormwater.
Yeah, we agree. Yeah, we owe Roger a little bit more clarity on where the bridge flows, but we'll provide that with him and work through it. Yeah, I mean, number 3 is the dewatering calc, which we noted before, which, Roger and I will work out.
The parking lot that we were just talking about where you're not meeting the current code,
The visitor lot.
existing nonconformity with the grass island, does that have any stormwater management on it currently?
No, but in the ultimate layout, we are picking it up and sending it through. It drains into the West Lancaster system, so it goes.
And is
through
that
those
something that
systems.
has a water quality treatment element?
That has the infiltration sections as well.
So part of when you have that grass island in the center is an opportunity to break up some of the, detach some of the water, but you are treating it anyhow.
Yeah, and like we said, we are adding 2 islands, just not all the ones that if you were building a new parking spot would be required.
Will they have trees in them?
Yes.
Other board comment?
My only question is, I didn't get it. Don't think we got a straight answer on the 2, number 4 and 5 in Saldo. About the visitor lot, we didn't. Staff, you feel confident you two will work that out. I didn't hear the applicant say we'll comply.
Those are existing nonconformities that we intend to maintain.
Right. So is Roger? Do you have a thought on those 2, or Peter?
Yeah, this is something we can work out.
Okay, great.
Worst case scenario, and just to keep things clean, they can request a waiver, and it would be a perfectly appropriate waiver to request, considering that they have an existing nonconformity that they're not adjusting in any way, shape, or form.
That's fine, I just didn't hear staff weigh in on those two, that's all.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's not a big issue.
Okay.
Excuse me, any public comment?
Just really quick, these are lovely plans. Are they available to the public? I've not seen these. And the reason I ask is that the Chapel Drive appears to have shifted again further west even than it was on prior versions, and now appears to run more or less on the property line between the visitor lot and Moriarty Hall, which means a significant tree screen is going to have to come down, just so you know.
PC members, the plans are available online on our website, as well as there's a copy here for residents to come in and view at any time that they would like.
And just for background, we discussed the relocation of Church Walk at the last planning commission we presented at, and that was a result of some suggestions from PennDOT in discussion with Amy and staff on phasing of that constructability and greater separation for traffic signals and turning movements from the being directly underneath the bridge. So I believe we presented that the last time we were here.
And that's still subject to additional PennDOT review, right?
Correct, yeah, that driveway fronts on the PennDOT road, so it would need a PennDOT permit.
Other public comment at this point? No.
Hopefully I don't get dizzy up here, sitting up and sitting. So now we're on to the Pikefield Garage comments for zoning. And comment one is a will comply. Roger, I believe, is just asking for some information on the existing average grade calculation, so we can provide that to him. Number two is the one item that we wanted to discuss. This is speaking to, I guess, the building facade length requirements on the code. Well, it's comment 2, and then it's page 6 of 34, C 2.1. And this relates to the way the CICD code is written is you can't have an uninterrupted facade length of greater than 180 feet without the 6 by 24 articulation for the full height of the building. So what we've provided on the drawing is dimensions along every facade, dimensions for the 6 by 24 inch articulation, and then a dimension along that facade length. Same thing in all those scenarios. We've provided all those dimensions, and none of those dimensions exceed the 180 feet. So we believe we've provided, the proper dimensions on the plan to show the compliance with, no single uninterrupted facade of greater than 180 feet.
Staff is on board with this? Roger? Are you in agreement with that? That they've satisfied your requirements as to this section?
Yes, I believe they have.
Number 3 is a comment that's been on the previous phases, just providing some more information on the lighting details. So we'll get that information to Roger. That's a will comply. Number 4 is just asking for some additional design documents. So we'll get Roger the design plans from the parking garage designer that just shows the multiple levels and verifies all the parking stall sizes. They're all compliant, so we'll get him the garage plans for that. So that's a will comply.
I have one question with regard to number 3, and I do not know if our ordinance really addresses this or not. But I did mention it before, so I'm kind of curious. I understand about the foot candles at the residential property, but there's kind of a difference between the light that might actually spill from it and onto my property and what I might see when I look out into the night sky, you know, if I wanted to look west. And it's obviously going to look very different. And I think there's a garage up in Bryn Mawr that I've seen where there's screens of some sort on certain walls of the levels to mute that lighting that will be coming off the building. And I don't know if there's any design plans for that.
I'll defer to the architect.
Or if that is part of this Dark Sky Association requirement.
It is.
It is. So the screens would do the job? I mean, you're still going to look across the field and be able to see that the lights are on.
I think they can address the
Okay.
There are several components to what people think of as glare or related issues. It's backlight, uplight, and glare, or BUG, bug. So the fixtures that we're looking at are all looking at those three issues and are being designed to minimize all of those components. We're also looking at asymmetrical lighting distribution patterns to focus light where the light belongs instead of throwing it universally in 360 degrees. So the lighting calculations that show up on these plans are based on appropriately selected lights. And what Roger's just asked for is to see more information on each of those specific lights to understand, I guess, the specifics of those particular fixtures. But the light calculations were based on those as well. So issues like glare and backlight will also be addressed along with the uplight with these fixtures.
So maybe I'm not saying my question correctly, or I'm not understanding. I understand what I think our code says, which is that the light spillage and the glare can't get onto my property.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the same as if I look out the window, I can see that there's a building in the distance that has on its lights, and that changes my view looking out the window.
I mean, you can't physically screen all light from all viewing angles, of
Correct.
course. But these are designed to direct the light down with proper cutoffs so that while you might physically see that there's a light, it's more of the general glow from, say, like the light off of the glass as opposed to seeing the sharp light source itself.
I understand. That's what I understood it the way I thought I understood it. So then my question is, are there further measures that could, at least on the east side of Pike Garage where the Barley Cone neighbors are there further measures you could take in actual kind of screening to further reduce that?
Right. Well, along
Above and beyond our code is basically.
along the Barley Cone backyards, if you look in the Pike set, there's a series of sections that were drawn.
And tell us the page when you,
I'm finding it.
okay, when you get to it.
C 7.3. And those are showing different locations of light fixtures and view angles to those light fixtures and the relative angles and how they're being cut off. And then when you also add in the fact that the garage is 500 feet away from the property line, the amount, I mean, again, you'll have the sense that there's some light there, but it won't have that same glaring effect that you have now.
Yeah, so that one's going back to 3. We already spoke about number 4, where we'll get the detailed garage plans he requests. On number 5, we disagree with this comment. I think there's a difference between the CI/CD code language and the original base code. The CI/CD language only regulates the 38-foot height requirement. There's no requirement on any specific number of stories. So the parking garage complies with the 38-foot height requirement, and that's the only standard that's applicable to the CI/CD.
Does that mean that two of them are either it's a grade difference or they're underground or partially underground or?
Well, one of them is, the first level is underground as Ethan Avenue falls away, and then the 5th level is parking on the roof, so it's not actually a level. It's 4 levels with parking on the roof, and the first level is tucked underground underneath as Ethan Avenue falls away.
But it is 38 feet high, at least from the highest grade.
38 feet from the average existing grade around the perimeter of the building.
But the cars will be above that 38 feet, the way you're designing it, right?
Well, on the top, the cars will be sitting on the top roof, and then there's a parapet wall that
So
surrounds that
that's
area.
completely screened, the height of the car?
I don't know the height of the parapet wall. I believe it's a bumper guard and headlight, but I don't know if it's above the entire car.
Yeah, it's a solid parapet up to, a height that covers the headlights, and then a guardrail above that to provide
So does
guardrail
the
protection.
guardrail count in the height?
The height's measured to the topmost structural element of the building, or the structure.
The parapet roof doesn't. The parapet and the guardrail
So none of that counts?
are correct. It's to the roof. It's
So
to the
it's-
top deck.
Does the parapet above the roof count?
Yeah, you have the top floor, and that's where the height's measured to, and then there's a parapet wall and a guide rail that are both excluded by definition in the height calculation that is a bumper guard and is high enough to block the headlights.
But it wouldn't matter either way anyway. Even if you put a roof, it wouldn't count? It's to the elevation of the,
Well,
in the 38
the
feet?
comment relates to whether or not there's a restriction to 3 stories, and that's in the original code, but not in the CICD, so.
It just strikes me, 2 things. One, I want Roger to comment because it's in his letter, and he seems to be suggesting that it isn't really 38 feet. So that's my first question. Why is it in your letter, I guess?
I was asking for clarification. We don't have design drawings of the garage yet. I was asking for clarification. I didn't want it to go unnoticed and unspoken that there is a height limit on this garage.
Okay. The other thing that strikes me is if you're trying to incentivize at all, unless you mandate instead, that students store their cars, I would imagine they don't want to store them, if they have a choice, on the roof deck. And then the oddity of that would be that every time you have a special event, people would be having to park on the roof because the warehousing is going on lower decks.
The way the parking garage management system is currently being discussed and designed is that we have a nested system where there's actually an access control to the 4th and 5th levels, which is where the student parking would be, that requires a swipe of the student ID. And students would be required, people going into the garage would be required to swipe during non-event times so that it would signal the gate. And then if a student went in and then parked in one of the lower 3 levels without triggering the second gate at the upper level, public safety could be notified that a student is parking in an incorrect location. In addition, the public would not be able to park on the 4th or 5th level because they wouldn't have the ability to get past that second gate to get up there. So it's really a system that's set up to force students and only students to park at those top 2 levels.
If it works.
So we'll provide the information Roger's seeking for number 5. And number 6 relates to the steep slopes and some utility lines that are running through those steep slopes. Those slopes were created when the softball field was constructed, and Villanova's pulling out the original permit of the grading permit to prove that those are exempted slopes that were constructed under a grading permit. So that should resolve that issue when we provide Roger that paperwork. Yeah, yes. It's a will address with Roger.
Unless you can't find the permits or...
I saw the permit this afternoon.
It's not a will comply, they're going to show that they don't need to comply.
Right,
Yes, but the way you showed that is that you have to produce the permits.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. We have the permit. I saw it a few hours ago. And then for subdivision land development is the same fire marshal comment. We met with him, well, we await his comments. We believe he's on board with our approach, and we can discuss or address any comments he has when they're issued. But he is aware that the fire lane is grass paver. We spoke through that, and he's okay with that.
I do have a question about grass pavers because it actually came up in an unrelated project
Okay.
where there is a use of grass or pavers or grass, something like this for emergency access, and it's not getting plowed in the winter. How will that get addressed? Grass pavers don't get plowed in the winter, so it's effectively, whenever there's snow, it's not an access. So what's the way to address that, Roger? And it happened this year on a property, an application that they utilized this.
I think that's more of an appropriate question for Steve, and
Oh, he's out of the room.
I see he's not here. I don't get
All
involved
right,
in the
let's get
plowing
back to that
operations.
one. I want to circle that and get back to it because it's actually going
So
on.
Susan, that's something you want to have in their operation and maintenance somehow?
I want to hear from, Steve is the right one, he's just not in the room.
So we want it somewhere agreed to that would be maintained open?
Yeah, I want to, I
Is that
really
what
want
you
to hear
would wanna
staff's
see?
comments on that one, is really what it is. But I'll come back to it.
Sorry, my name's Red from Route 2. I'm here on behalf of Steve, so
I meant Steve
Norsini.
I'm
And
sorry,
Steve-
that's okay.
Steve-
But thank you for letting us know you were
Yeah.
here.
Steve is, unfortunately, is not feeling well, so he has left, and he's not coming back. So you're going to have to hold off on that,
Okay.
okay?
Yeah, I don't want that one to fall off the radar because it's an issue on a different property.
But that being private property, the Villanova would be responsible for maintaining that anyway.
Oh, fine, great, let's hear
Like
it.
Steve, I'm not feeling very well either, but I think the way most public works departments handle it is you can get a special snowplow blade that has small pneumatic tires and allows an operator to actually drive over a leveled grass surface and plow the majority of the snow so that there might still be 2 or 3 inches left, but it will be passable as opposed to having a foot or 2 feet like we've had in events this year. So I don't know if Radnor maintains such equipment or university does.
Would be the university, right?
Yeah, but that's how it's handled.
Okay, so maybe I'll put a note, maybe I haven't thought about that then, that's fine, thank you.
And then the remainder are stormwater comments, which are, once again, all bookkeeping comments that are details that we can work through directly with Roger. And then the general comments really just restate the grass pavers for the fire lane and requesting additional information on the height and parking count and parking stall dimensions of the garage. So we can provide that to Roger.
There are still, every now and then, larger than not open things in here. And I mean, that if Roger hasn't had a chance, for example, to look at the underground basin in Pike, that might affect your plans in terms of the sizing or adding to that detention system. So, by the way, have you already seen that since this letter came out? Or I know this letter is fairly new, but
We haven't been through all the details on the Pike system yet, but we will work through that with the applicant.
okay.
And again, I want to reiterate that they will comply with this eventually. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like they've been fighting it, because they've been working very well with us and they've complied with everything that we've asked so far. And if it's an issue that is a code-related issue, either they will meet it or they will have to come back and ask for a waiver. And they've been very cooperative in meeting those all the way through this process.
Well, there's only a couple more comments on Pike, so you might as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's everything for the Pike Garage. The only thing that remains is the Performing Arts Center.
Okay. Do we have comments from the board or the public? At the Pike Garage juncture, right here? No? Okay. Okay, keep going.
So that moves us on to the Performing Arts Center. Once again, zoning comment number 1 is just some additional information he's requesting on the calculations for the average existing grade and the height of the Performing Arts Center calculation, so we can provide him those details and work through that. Comment number 2 is similar to the garage comment about the facade length. I believe we need to add some additional facade length details, but it's the same approach. There's no single uninterrupted facade along the Performing Arts Center that exceeds 180 feet before we get the 6 by 24 offset or articulation. And those are extended, fully up and down through the whole structure
And if I can add to that, one of the reasons that I've been repetitive in these comments through this whole process is that I just want everything documented on the plan so that there's no confusion as to what was a building, what was a facade, where the measurements were from, and it's the only reason. I'm not saying that they're not complying with this. I'm just saying that I want everything clearly documented on the drawings.
Comment number 3 is about the spacing between the garages, and I think part of it is we didn't shade the garage, and it is a little hard to see, but we do show the upper footprint of the garage, and the required 30-foot spacing between the garages is documented there. So that's on the drawings. We can highlight its location to Roger, but we believe that comment is a will comply or is already addressed. And once again, comment number 4 is about the screening details for the dumpster location back in this corner. There's a typical dumpster detail on the housing plan set. So I believe we're using that same typical detail throughout the whole property, so we just have to copy that detail onto this plan set. So we'll update that, but we intend to screen all the dumpsters, following that same typical detail that was submitted with the housing plan. And comment number 5 is the repeat comment about the lighting, additional lighting detail that's been requested for all the different properties. So we can obviously work through, all the phases and all the lighting design, at one time with Roger to make sure he's comfortable with what we're proposing. And then the only remaining comments have to do with stormwater again there, and those are just bookkeeping items again on providing some additional charts and clarifying some very minor items and adding a note that we'll work through in the global stormwater discussions that we're having with Roger. And that's the remainder of Roger's letter. Yeah.
Okay. Roger, I know you've been commenting as we go, but this is your opportunity to make a general statement if you want, or...
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Now, we have an interesting thought right here. I'm looking at Amy's letter, and we had a brief discussion before the meeting. Due to the fact that some of the materials are coming in so tightly on the meeting schedule, Amy has not had an opportunity to do as detailed a review of some of the traffic issues. And there are some extant traffic issues, as we know, that one of the hot spots is the right turn onto Ithan. Amy, would you like to tell us where we are?
My purpose in putting the March 20th letter memorandum together was to focus on some of the big ticket items that were concerning. Some of the other issues can be worked out through the process. I don't see that they should hold up. They're moving forward, and that was the reason that I brought these to your attention when I could. But there was just one additional thing that I needed to add that was not in the March 20th, and they're not aware of it just because today was the first time that I became aware of it. And that would just be that the southbound Ithan at Lancaster, there's a 75-foot left turn lane there, and it appears through the analysis that 135 to 170 feet is required on that side. And we haven't seen the Q analysis until this latest submission. So that's something that's going to need to be worked out. I don't know if you want to go through some of the items that were discussed in my letter.
I'm so sorry. Could you repeat that? It was a lot to...
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Consider Ithan and Lancaster. Get that in your mind.
Yep.
Okay. Coming in front of the Butler Annex. Okay, that's the southbound or the southbound approach of Ithan. Okay. So there's a left turn lane there. And
above our street,
yes,
you mean?
Yeah, you can barely see it on there. This is from the traffic impact study that Mr. Tavani prepared. And apparently there's a 75-foot left turn lane there. And through the analysis, it appears with the redistribution of the traffic that they're going to exceed the capacity on that left turn lane. And so that's something that's going to need to be addressed. I did not have time to go in to look to see what kind of right-of-way, if it's a pavement marking thing that could resolve it. That was just one of the things that I did not have in my letter. And like I said, I tried to focus on just things that I thought should be discussed or considered here. I don't know if you want to go through the March 20th memorandum or.
Yeah, I mean, we have comments or responses to the items that are at least listed for discussion now, and know that there's additional review still going on. So we can discuss some of the items.
Well, let's do that, but I also want to make sure that we talk about the upcoming, so to speak, special PennDOT meeting as well.
Correct. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's comments about the right turn lane that are, the comments basically more discussion forthcoming. So, we can discuss that or defer that, but there's some other items that relate more specifically to other plan items that I think we can work through and at least get those resolved.
Do you think, Amy, that a lot of the stuff that is in here can be worked out between the two of you rather than us going over it at the meeting? Are these things we have to make a judgment on, or they're corrections that are going to be made?
No, I actually was here for a different meeting with Alex this afternoon, and I asked him if he wanted to discuss some of these things, and it doesn't seem to me that these are going to be deal breakers. He was able to explain to me why certain things, he may be requesting a waiver, but he provided me with additional information on why he felt that he couldn't meet what I had requested in here, and I was satisfied with the answers that he gave me. And that's, I think the majority of the things that we're discussing can be resolved between further discussions and back and forth.
Does it make more sense for you to put a letter back to Amy on these issues before we actually?
Yeah, I mean,
It just seems like this is the kind of thing that a lot of questions could come up about things that people
I would
really don't.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I would prefer to issue my letter, and then we would be able to kick off with will complies. Like I said, this 320 letter is in all of our comments.
So you're saying we should go through these ones now, or we should not?
Unless you want to.
I feel like it's premature.
I would agree.
Because if a lot of them are going to be addressed, then we can just focus on the ones that are.
The biggest issue is going to be that right turn lane on Lancaster at Ithan, and that isn't entirely up to the township. That's that's a PennDOT road, and ultimately it'll be PennDOT's decision whether or not there are improvements there. And I think that turn radius on the corner.
Do you anticipate that the PennDOT meeting that's coming up, is that more of just a public education meeting, or is that something that will result in some outcome?
Yeah, I did not request the meeting. I will be attending it, but it's my understanding that the meeting was brought forth so that residents have an opportunity to voice their concerns in front of both PennDOT, and now the applicant will be there, and basically to get consensus on some of the issues that they feel are outstanding.
So even if many of the folks that are attending the PennDOT meeting may not be here tonight, but clearly there's some sort of a groundswell of interest in a further meeting with PennDOT, since PennDOT is a decider in this.
Yes, and I'm not sure if the discussion about the right, and Steve's not here, so I don't know what background discussions were occurring, or if that meeting is going to be used to discuss the right turn lane on Lancaster. I don't know if Villanova is intending to provide the analysis that PennDOT had requested, or if that will be done under separate cover and outside of that public meeting. That I'm not sure of. So I don't know if things will be resolved at that meeting.
I have one question for you, and I didn't want to talk about it till now, but that on your review where you say that the campus parking is going to have a period of time with 198 space deficiency. Page 3 of her Gilmore review letter.
From way back, that's an old letter, is that correct?
No, this is your March
No, it's
20th
the-
letter, unless that's an old comment.
Yeah, it's the
Oh, I
phasing
see.
discussion.
That, yeah, that actually
a-
doesn't a comment. That's a just quantifying, taking things. You're talking about,
The phasing deficiency.
oh, I gotcha.
Does that create an actual parking space shortage? And because the applicant and Roger, other people have said this isn't going to have parking deficiencies.
Alex, do you have the parking
It's-
phasing plan there?
It's a reduction of the existing surface, of the existing parking on campus today, but it is still compliant with the township required parking at that
That was
station.
my question. Thank you.
I think over the last 2 years, Villanova has said from time to time that the main lot is never actually full.
Correct. Overall, the whole campus, there's, from the studies that they've done and the counts they've done, there's throughout campus about 700 parking spots available throughout campus, even on the busiest days.
Yeah, and
So-
that was even during special event. That's Amy over here. I recall from a year or two ago that even during special events, during a peak basketball event, they still had plenty of spaces on site. The problem was that people weren't aware where those spaces were, so that special event plan will help with that situation.
Okay. We do not have Steve here, Gabriel, but we do have a representative here. And we haven't invited you to comment. I wasn't aware until about 10 minutes ago that you were the Steve. But this might be a moment before we do whatever we're going to do tonight that you could comment on things that perhaps have not been brought to our attention, if you would like. Oh, and introduce yourself too, other than as Steve.
Oh. Oh, I'm fine standing, but thank you.
Well, if you get tired.
Oh, I'm really good. Thank you. Lauren Zumbrun with her too. I apologize for the confusion earlier. Most of the comments in our letter, if there's anything specific that you'd want to go over, we certainly can relate to the buffer planting strips that are proposed. And the biggest thing that we're asking for is really just to see a perspective view so that we can see it from the viewpoint of the residents, when they're looking up either at the parking area or at the garage, that we can see that there's a full screen. The garage being that if, they're going to work with residents, I understand, on the other side of the ball field.
Jumping in on that for 1 second, of course, we've recently seen plans where we've had ground level computer simulated buffers, and we haven't really seen that here, and I'm wondering if we could in the future.
We have buffer plans in here.
Yeah, in the back.
By shade tree and
Yeah.
everyone else. So I know we have,
There's nothing like the actual site, with the train tracks not visible, et cetera.
I don't know.
I can't speak for the landscape architect.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you want to just bring that back and get back to us on that.
My question, I guess, to the applicant is in the same approach of, Steve's letter and Amy's and all that. Is there anything in Ritu's letter that you're not going to be able to comply with? I know that there's been an ongoing conversation about and in the Nave Newell letter, there was the discussion about disagreement about the 20-foot buffer along the rear of the property behind the housing. Is that there's Nave Newell has a different interpretation from whoever made that comment. Do you recall what I'm
I did, and
Yeah.
I actually agree with their interpretation.
You subsequently agreed?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank
Yes.
you. And so is everything in the Ritu letter?
Really what Ritu wanted was more visual plans more than anything else. I don't think they disagreed with anything, my understanding. I think it was more, just they wanted more visual items, which aren't required by the code, and we're trying to provide that, and, we'll see what we can do as far as giving you something more, that shows the screen.
Right.
Well, I think he appreciated what you did. I think it was the housing section, but, or, dealing with the train. But that it was also Pike Garage, there were comments there too, I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, and in requesting additional visuals, it was really just to make sure that the different plantings that were proposed would work together to provide a full screen. There's some deciduous trees that are going to be remaining, and just ensuring that it's going to provide a dense enough screen, really for residents at all times during the year. I believe our letter was the one that had the comment about the 20 feet and a potential alternative. That wasn't something that we necessarily had a large concern with, but more, again, just wanting to make sure that whatever was proposed would provide sufficient buffering.
And are you aware of the PICO comment that they can't be within 32 feet of the train now? Even the tips of vegetation can't be within 32 feet of the power lines,
Yes.
What do you think, or what can the applicant comment as to what that may be doing to some of the dimensions of the buffers, if anything? Do they disappear? Or?
I don't think it relates directly to the buffer side. There was a question as to whether or not additional plant material could be planted in the area of the original PICO clearing that happened to supplement some buffering. We took the existing overhead lines and offset them 32 feet. If you go on the north side, you're underneath the catenary lines for the railroad, so you can't plant there. And if you go south 32 feet, you're on private property. The overhead lines are only 5 feet from the property line on the PICO portion. So by the time you get to the 32-foot offset, you're onto private property along the Aldwin homes. So
the buffer can really only be on one side.
It can't be on either side.
Either side. Okay.
If you honor that 32-foot setback, you're either inside the train tracks or on private property. So there's no additional plant material that can be offered along those buffer lines other than what's already being offered. We're putting additional plant material on that one corner of Aldwin Triangle that was more of a lawn area that we're adding some of our replacement trees in there in between the existing trees. So that area we've always proposed as buffer. That's the only area that Villanova controls that's outside that 32-foot corridor that PICO requires.
Okay.
But are you telling us this was always on the plan as that, or is this a new change?
No,
You've always known that 32 feet.
We've always shown additional buffer material on Aldwin, which was requested during the original conditional use hearing. Those plans have always been on there. The conditional use also asked us to contact PICO to say, can you add any more material in proximity of those PICO lines that was previously cleared?
It was never on the plan to begin with.
We never proposed planting.
Okay, that's what I was trying to make sure.
PICO confirmed that we're not allowed to propose planting.
So it was a request that you cannot provide.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we've discussed with PICO and we can't accommodate
Okay.
any additional planting.
Board comment?
About what? About the
Anything.
RIT2?
Or RET2, I guess, to start.
No, I mean, nothing with RIT2, no.
I have some questions regarding level of service. In the 516-page report of traffic that I managed to go through today,
Oh, my gosh.
sort of. On page 5, levels of service on Lancaster Avenue and Spring Mill Road and Ithan. The existing is a D and an F on both of those intersections presently. Are you planning on improving that?
Well, I don't have a report.
Pages 5 and 6.
Amy's going to give us a whole.
I just have this question.
It's actually 527 pages.
Sorry.
Yeah, I only printed the first
Gee, maybe I
one.
missed 60 of them.
You are right. There are several level service Ds, a handful of Fs. The PennDOT standard for whether or not improvements are necessary is if the overall level of service degrades by more than 10 seconds. So if you look at the very last row of that first table of page 5, you'll see that, for example, an E79 in the first column, that's the existing condition during the AM peak hour. But even that isn't important because what you really are intended to compare is the future base condition, which is some point in time when the project opens, compared with the projected condition, which is that same point in time with the site traffic added. And then since this is a TIS, a transportation impact study versus a TIA, you're also required to add an additional 5 years of growth to test the staying power of the improvements. So it's really the last two columns in each half of these several tables that you're really looking at. So you can see that with the site traffic added, we go from an E70 to an E72 in the AM peak hour. So technically, there really aren't required improvements using PennDOT standards. But you may recall that as part of conditional use, the applicant agreed to provide funding for can't think of the term right now.
Traffic improvements.
Traffic
I think it was
adaptive-
$175 or $175,000.
Yes, traffic adaptive controllers. And this is a relatively new technology which has been demonstrated to reduce overall delays as well as delays on in critical movements, through movements significantly. But the problem is that the technology is so new that there really isn't a standard that PennDOT has yet provided to consultants to use for how to model it in these relatively complex software packages. So one of the things you may have noticed in the exhibit toward the very end is that Pannoni Associates put forth a memo which is actually something that PennDOT reviewed and has accepted, that shows there could be 20% reduction in delays. None of that is reflected here. So even without that added benefit, you can see that there isn't that much added delay. If you add that benefit, it reduces it further. Plus, the most important thing, as this commission has heard patiently many times from me, is that this study includes every parking space as being treated exactly the same as it is today, meaning that any space that's due to a commuting student continues to be actively turning over during the weekday peak periods, which we know not to be true, and in my opinion, that adds an additional level of conservativeness to these findings. So I'm not going to stand here and say that things are going to get magically better to the point where you don't notice delays, but I firmly believe that with the traffic adaptive component, with the fact that currently commuting students become campus residing, that there will be a noticeable improvement here.
Did you say will or will not?
There will be a noticeable, I believe there will be a noticeable improvement.
Okay,
It's not going to be night and day 100% better, but I think it's going to be an improvement.
What sort of level do you think it would drop to?
It's a good question.
Or
I mean,
go up to, depending which way?
So,
you look at it.
during the morning, the benefit is the reduction in people no longer commuting. So you could imagine, for example, most of the benefit would be in the eastbound direction. So the benefit on certain approaches would be less noticeable or not present at all, for example. But in the eastbound, I think that the average person may notice a slight reduction in delay. I don't know if I would clarify it as a letter change, level of service change. But we are talking about 1,100 students, and depending on when they come for class, it's going to relate to, I think, a noticeable delay, especially to another traffic engineer who might be driving along the road.
Well, in DVRCP study from last year, they made one statement that said there was very little other development going on in the general, Blue Route area around there, which of course we all know is not true because we've been also dealing with biomed and other buildings that are being built over there. So looking at an F or an E or a D to start with gets really painful when you start figuring in some of these others. So even though biomed is not your problem, if this could be reduced at all, am I saying that right? Should you say reduced?
Reduce the delay or
Okay.
improve the level of service.
Improve the levels. It would be a help in the overall traffic flow through Radnor Township.
Well, I agree. The DVRPC study, in fairness to the region's NPO, was published 2 years ago, and biomed, for example, wasn't nearly as far along as they are now.
However, they did own the property for about 10 years.
It's true, but in fairness, traffic studies are really typically based on approved land development plans, not even people that just have zoning approval, but actual approved land development plans, and even those don't always necessarily go forward and manifest into traffic. All I can say, and I might have a problem with bias since I'm here with the applicant, is that I really believe that this will result in a reduction in traffic along the corridor. So I believe the project itself is going to turn into a benefit to to that intersection as well as others. But the TIS doesn't even take credit for that because we did not treat it as such. We treated all the traffic as continuing to be generated.
Okay. One other comment I have, and you don't have to necessarily reply to this unless you want to. I think by having that additional right turn lane at Ithan will help to move this traffic through because I used to drive down Lancaster Avenue all the time into Bryn Mawr in the morning and the evening. And what was said here about that one lane on the right-hand side just being lined up all the way because people are trying to make a turn is correct. So I think if you can do something to speed that up, it will help the traffic immensely along Lancaster Avenue. And I think the additional right turn lane would do that.
We will be addressing this in greater detail with the simulations, but since you are familiar with the study, if you look on pages 32 or 33, which are the existing volumes, figure 3 and figure 4.
This is the big one? I didn't
yes.
print the whole thing. I just printed a couple pages.
Well, Amy will correct me if I'm misquoting this, but figure 3 shows that the right turn volume during the AM peak hour is 35 cars. That's over the whole hour. And that's crossed with over 780 through vehicles. So during the AM peak hour, the right turn volume is 5% of that total approach. During the PM peak hour, it's 91 vehicles versus 937 going through, so it's 10%.
Yeah.
So it's.
I'm not going to argue with you, but I find it really hard to believe.
Those
people
numbers,
who
can I
go
just
through
ask a question? Those numbers they're from a traffic count, a one-day traffic count, correct? Not from counters.
I don't know.
For the percentage of the
They're
turn.
from people who are actually counting the
But
cars.
one day, right? The one
Yes, and
day,
they haven't
which
been
is all that's
disputed.
required, and I understand that.
Right, and they haven't been disputed by anybody to this point.
Can you tell us when that was?
I don't have, this is a big document, I don't have it committed to memory, but it was with all the other counts, the only other 18 intersections that were done. And I think
You don't know when the traffic counts were taken
I
for
think they
this
were fall of
study?
2012, since this goes back 3.5 years now, I think.
2012. Okay, so
Yeah.
fairly recent.
If it was the same day, the pictures that were in the study were taken, I believe, September 4th, 2014, which was Labor Day weekend, heading into Labor Day weekend. And that's why all the roads looked empty. If that count was taken then, I could see why you would get strange counts. But again, I'm just going to mention it now. You don't have to defend it because PennDOT is going to, I guess, make the final decision on that right turn lane.
Well, the intangible on the right turn lane is the rest of the day, what's going on. It wouldn't only provide a benefit during the peak. It would provide a benefit throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
It especially provides a benefit when people are visiting an area where they're not familiar with the place. And we all know what it's like to be a visitor someplace where you're trying to decide, is that the right place to turn? Where am I supposed to go from here? Where's the parking lot? Where's the entrance? Those types of drivers are moving slower than your normal, and that's going to contribute to, I don't see how the traffic count can actually capture the behavior of the motorist based on their comfort level of the environment that they're in and how that they're going to be driving at that moment. Does that make sense? So that could make you slow down a little bit more. It could make you back up. It could make you, but there's a lot more than 35 cars there turning in out of 780. I mean, it's backed up.
I think we have, go ahead. No, I'm just going to say board comment, please.
Well, I was going to ask about, could you educate me a little bit on what these A, B, C, D, and Fs mean? I mean, as I understand it, there are certain PennDOT information, but there are certain periods of time that you have to wait for an intersection to clear or something like that. Is that
Are you looking at the level of service?
Yes.
Okay. A through F are the designations that we have. And typically, those letters correspond to a certain seconds of delay occurring while you're at the intersection, average delay per vehicle. So up at A, you would be traveling down the road and you wouldn't have any trouble changing lanes, making turning movement because it's free flow is what we would characterize it as. And as you move down the spectrum from B to C to D to E to F, F is failure, which is gridlock. You're not moving. There's no ability to change lanes as easily as you might want to. That's the type of traffic volumes that you would be experiencing. C and D, well, C still tends to be acceptable. When you start to get into D and E, that's when it starts to break down and you start having trouble. And you might want to mitigate at those points. Does that help you? And it's usually about 10 seconds of delay for each of those level of services.
All right, so there would be 0 delay on an A, 10-second.
0 to 9 or 10, correct. And then 10 to 20.
Okay, and D would be because now it's 30 seconds or longer, or 40 seconds or longer.
In and around. It's different if it's a stop-controlled intersection versus a traffic signal. But for a general rule of thumb, that's something that you can just kind of keep in mind. And so A is unusual, but you do have quite a few intersections where there's such little traffic coming out of an intersection. They would experience A. There's no delay to them to getting onto Lancaster. And then when you get to an intersection like Ithan and Lancaster Avenue, I don't have that section open, but you have more traffic volumes, you have some delay for startups, traffic signal moving around the intersection. So when you see, I'm not looking at, you want me to move to that section and address that, or?
Well, I happen to be.
What page are you on? If you just tell me what the page is.
I'm on page 6.
All right.
I understand.
Well,
My question is, what, it says F, for example, when it says F125, what's the 125 mean?
the number of seconds, the seconds delay. Oh, wait,
So it's
wait.
2 minutes there in that particular
Wait.
instance.
What page are you on, 6 again?
I'm on page 6, it's the item 3. If you look northbound, northbound L on Ithan Avenue,
Okay, just.
F125 is at the 2025 base. I was just wondering what that meant. And basically, it's telling me that it's gridlock and it's going to sit there for 2 minutes before you
Okay, so
get
you're
through
at
the-
intersection 3 Lancaster Avenue and Ithan Avenue?
Correct. I just
right.
picked that because it's a big number.
Okay, so across the top, we have the AM and PM peak hours. So those are the 2 different hours that we're analyzing, because that's when the peak occurs on those roadways, in the morning, in the afternoon. And if you come down, you can see the different years. And as Mr. Tavani mentioned, we look at the base, which is, if we didn't build this, that's the base. And then projected becomes, if we do build this, that's the projection. This is what we're anticipating is going to happen at the intersection based on what we know for the development. So if you come across, those are by the movement. So going to the far right underneath 2025, with the timing improvements that Mr. Tavani is proposing, we would see 98 seconds of delay during the peak hour for the northbound left on Ithan Avenue. And then moving down below that, the through movement would have 43 seconds of delay, which is level of service D. And we would have 50 seconds of delay for the southbound left. And for the southbound through, we would have level of service E in 76 seconds. And then down at the very bottom where it says D49, that would mean, based on all the approaches and all the movements that are occurring at that intersection, the average amount of delay per vehicle would be 49 seconds, level of service D.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean,
Yep.
I'm an
You get
engineer,
to answer
but
the questions next time.
that's, thank you.
Okay, is there any public comment at this time? I'd like to invite them to make comment. And then after that, I'd like the board to make their comments, but it's clear that we haven't reviewed every letter of every submission that's come in because some of them don't exist. But go ahead.
My comments are fundamentally about the assumptions underlying the study. First of all, these were done, as FTA has pointed out, during peak hour, which means from 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning, and I think from, if memory serves, from 4:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon. He's probably correct that he didn't detect very many right turn movements from eastbound Lancaster to Ithan, for the simple reason that the Villanova students who are driving there, by definition, are upperclassmen. There isn't an upperclassman in his right mind who's going to schedule himself for an 8 or a 9 o'clock class. I have it from Villanova professors themselves that the average day for an upperclassman starts about 10 and ends about 2. It isn't that Villanova's commuting patterns make the ordinarily understood rush hour much, much worse. They do a little bit. What they do is they make the ordinarily understood rush hour last about 3 hours long. They add to it. It goes from 6:30, say, until about 9:30 or 10. That's the effect that the Villanova student commuter traffic pattern has on these intersections. Villanova's own economics expert has confirmed, in fact, that as many kids as are going to be captured by these dorms, the rental units that they vacate will be backfilled by other Villanova students. He's categorical about this. So the FTA may claim that it's a conservative and artificial thing to count these storage spaces as moving. But the fact is they are going to be moving. The fact is the commuting picture is unchanged. Just as many commuters will be coming to the campus after this project is built as are coming now. The only substantive difference is that there will be, depending on whose numbers you trust, somewhere between 1,300 residents and 600 residents new living with their cars at the intersection of Ithan and Lancaster, moving, shopping. You can claim all you want that their cars will be warehoused and stockpiled. My car is warehoused and stockpiled in my driveway. That doesn't mean it isn't good for 2 trips a day. Same thing with these kids. The Delaware River Planning Commission's report was quite clear. I mean, they made a lot of contentions, and it was interesting to read, but their end conclusion was that traffic is going to get worse, period. That's all I really have to say. I mean, it's treating this as a peak hour phenomenon is fallacious. What Villanova's proposing doing here is building a village within a village. They're bringing 1,000 people, and these 1,000 people are going to be resident at Ithan and Lancaster. And your job, I think, our job, is to figure out how to make that work. Thanks.
Other public comment? See people in the audience that often comment? No? No. Board comment?
Roger, I have one question. First of all, I really appreciated how we worked through the review letter tonight. That was a lot to cover, I thought, and I thought that was a really good process. We just received the Church Walk report late last week, so there's some point in the next week or two we'll get a review letter on that. I didn't get a review letter on
What are you referring to?
Church Walk and Bridge. We have a plan, but we didn't get a review of that plan.
And it also says revised on it, too.
And it does. It says revised, and I never saw it before.
I don't recall seeing that. I have to.
Maybe you haven't
Let me look
received it
into
yet.
my stuff here.
You broke out all the other plans.
All the other plans.
And this one
Church Walk
wasn't
we
in
haven't
your letter.
discussed.
That was my comment about 5 minutes ago, that there are things that haven't made it to a
Yeah, I mean,
full-blown letter.
So my short question, that was my question, so then my short comment is, my feeling is, my own personal feeling tonight is that we have a few issues, not really very many. I've written them down pretty detailed. I think we have to continue. We don't have a review letter for Church Walk. Amy, we don't have Amy's review letter. It's not like we can make a decision tonight, so it's just, I think we covered a lot tonight. I'm pretty proud, I think, but I'm pretty beat, too. So, you're on our April agenda, right?
Yeah, we're okay with
Okay.
6. I don't know if we are or not, but
Okay.
I think you have time. I think you also have time.
I think we've made a lot of really good progress.
Steve's not here, so,
Right. And
I think the only thing, Sue, I don't know biomed's on, and I think some zoning issues. Is that it? Or Kevin? Peter? Oh, no.
It's a packed plan.
Oh, okay.
Well, Nick,
All right.
you're doing it all, right?
Unless something's come off, there's two zoning applications. There's like 3 zoning. There's 6 or 7 items on it.
All right, well, let me back up. I was working under the assumption that we were continuing this to the April meeting, but I don't know how we could vote. We don't have a review letter on one of the plans that I have. Does everybody else have the Church Walk plan?
You'll get a review letter on that.
Great. So then it's about, is it workable to do it April 6th? Or do we need to do another date before the April 13th Board of Commissioners meeting?
Yeah, let's see, I know there was talk about next week, but I know it's spring break. No, everyone's going, you guys are going away? Okay.
Nick,
That's
you
why
are
we're here
on
tonight.
April 6th agenda. That's the first item on the agenda.
It's
So it was-
Villanova.
It was Villanova, then Biomed, then the Zoning Hearing Board of Appeals.
Yeah, and
Nick, if you have a few of those zoning hearing board ones, maybe they could get
Yeah, I
continued
got to
to
see what's
May.
going on with those too, some of them, Kevin.
Maybe you could move that to May.
Well, those hearings are scheduled for April, so.
Yeah, that's easy to say here, but not to the client, as you know. But I know there's at least one that Kevin and I have to talk about anyway, so. And whether it's even going to get.
Well, the question is, since this took up a couple meetings already, and we could easily go for another whole meeting on Villanova and still not finish. Biomed, it's a similar situation, if not worse. The zoning things probably are not a long meeting. How are we going to do all that in one meeting? We need another meeting next month. At least one, probably.
Well, I
Not
think-
that I'm,
Okay,
pushing for it, but I think it's a reality.
Well, I think that we haven't seen the biomed plan that we're going to see tonight when we take home. I think that's a factor. If that's a total change, you could comment or not.
Well, there's some, well, I disagree, but you'll see it. We shouldn't get into that.
Okay, we shouldn't,
Yeah,
no, all right,
we
let's not, let's not. Okay. Look, we're going to continue, I think we're going to, we'll vote, of course, continue this tonight. You're the first,
I would just request it be before April 13th, as Susan said.
But
You can
you're-
have 5 meetings in a row as long as it's before April 13th, in my mind.
okay. Well, and I'm going to defer to Steve because he couldn't be here tonight, but he is chair. And if he calls for a second meeting, then we'll do that. But clearly tonight, we're not ready to do a vote other than to continue, I think. And if there's some comments that people want to make in summary, but I'd like to keep it brief.
Can I ask a real question, though? You obviously have a phasing plan. You have a plan about how this whole thing's going to go on. If you're going to start doing any of that in calendar year 2015, you're going to have to let contracts and do something at some point. What was, past tense, your plan, and how would it be modified? You're talking about the 13th at the Board of Commissioners. I assume that's a really important thing.
Yeah, and I think if we're talking about phasing, Alex, why don't you just describe what the phasing is? I know the parking is probably the first phase, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the things that are going to be built first is the West Lancaster parking and the SAC garage. The SAC garage is just a grading permit submission, but West Lancaster parking is the first phase, and then the Pike garage follows that.
Is the Pike Garage slated for calendar 2015?
Doug,
After the WLA parking is built, so it's 16.
Thank you.
so, yeah, there's a little bit of thought down here that if we're going to continue, do you guys want to share?
Well, if they have a meeting scheduled for April 7th, correct? Is that? With PennDOT. Should we hear that one first before going any further with this? Could we do Villanova after April 7th? And then that way, everybody's weighed in and we've gotten some PennDOT information. Is that possible from your schedule to get something between April 8th and April 12th?
We're already going to have a meeting that week. April 6th. Yeah, I mean, you want 2 meetings in the same week? We've not been too keen on that in
Well,
the
it would be
past.
worse to go over this again and then have another meeting that
Yeah,
week
we're going to have to
as
have another one
well.
after it anyway.
Because we don't really have any new information.
My
until-
suggestion is if you want a second meeting on Villanova, don't schedule it in that week, but do schedule it in April,
Nick wants it before the 13th.
unless they're willing to flex.
I really don't know what we're going to
That's 2 in the same week.
be able to accomplish before that meeting is held.
Hang on, really the driving thing, because I heard Amy say, the PennDOT meeting is not her request. So the
PennDOT meeting I'll fill in for Steve since he left. The PennDOT meeting was requested by the residents in the area. I believe the Friends of Radnor, right? Requested the meeting with PennDOT, and I believe a state representative is going to attend that. That wasn't called by the township or required by the township. That was requested by the residents of PennDOT.
Right, but so I think it's important for us to understand how much that meeting, given that it's was resident requested, not staff requested it, but PennDOT's coming, how much that may or may not inform, and it's about traffic, how much that meeting may or may not inform Amy and other staff. And we don't know that, and maybe Amy doesn't know that.
Well, I don't know if Villanova is planning on preparing their special analysis, some traffic, or if that's even in the works right now or prepared to be submitted, because I believe that PennDOT won't be making an opinion until they've received that information and reviewed it.
My understanding, and Amy and Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, whatever PennDOT says, we're going to have to do anyway.
That's right, but it may affect their decision moving. I don't know.
It's up to you. I mean, I don't know if you want to keep the 6, then see if we need, and what we can, I don't know how much we can do, or maybe we handle all those issues except for that, and then maybe be just a brief.
Amy has a good point. It's not up to us. It really is up to PennDOT, and it's a permit that they issue, not the township. So whatever is discussed at that meeting is likely only to relate to the HOP.
I don't know about that, because the residents have been very
But it's their
actively
their
involved.
permit, PennDOT's permit. So we don't say no. We don't want to approve the PennDOT permit. We don't. It is what it is.
Well,
So maybe it's
So it doesn't matter.
right, Amy. I mean, like it's not like we don't weigh in on what
We do
PennDOT
weigh in.
requires.
We
No,
do weigh in.
we don't. The Planning Commission.
Right, correct.
I get the impression, from the board, that the board's going to want as a condition a right turn lane, even though we object. But I get that impression just from the comments I've heard from the board. So I don't know if.
No, but Nick, what I'm thinking is we can't put that as a condition.
But it's up to PennDOT.
Yeah, so we
determine,
can't put that as a condition, even if we want to. We can say no to the waiver
Your
for the
condition, you could make a
radius.
condition, but then you would have the fallback on if it's accepted by PennDOT.
Right.
If you made that condition.
And wouldn't PennDOT be guided partially by recommendations of planning and/or the commissioners?
PennDOT actually is open to some guidance. When we started the initial discussion and we let PennDOT know that we felt the right turn lane was important, they actually sided with us and were in support of it. They didn't say that they had to do it, but they were in support because Radnor Township requested that right turn lane. But when they came forward and showed the right turn lane going into the garage on the departure, is everyone following what I'm? That was when PennDOT actually pulled back on that and said, we are no longer supporting that right turn lane. We think it would be better to allow those pedestrians to continue to cross with the timings that they currently have, maybe some slight increase due to the new changes on how we determine ped timing. And then we went back to PennDOT and said, we really think you need to reconsider this. There were some concerns from the police department. There were some residents' concern. And maybe you should be looking at the special events too and see how that affects the operation of the intersection. And PennDOT came back and said, we would like Mr. Tavani to put together some additional studies on behalf of Villanova to show us that there isn't a problem there.
And I think and I see a resident sitting in the back. I think that what I'm hearing from you is that PennDOT is going to make the final determination, but they've been willing to take input on 2 different factors, and I think that the residents who live right there are very determined and have gotten PennDOT to come have a meeting with them to share their thoughts, and that may inform PennDOT as well. And what I'm hearing Kathy and Liz say, and Regina, and I feel the same way, is I don't want to waste the applicant's time or our time or your time on April 6th having a meeting to discuss this when stuff that may or may not occur on April 7th may inform PennDOT's ultimate decision, and then we have to meet again about it. That doesn't make sense to me. So that's what I think we're bumping up against right now. I hear the applicant's request for April 13th, and I heard Liz ask you guys what's workable versus, after this PennDOT meeting, what's workable for staff for us to do this.
Honestly, it could go either way. If PennDOT if you gave approval and that right turn lane wasn't there, there's nothing to change or alter that it couldn't come back in through final at that point.
Yeah, we're a
If
preliminary here.
PennDOT decided that they wanted that right turn lane, it wouldn't matter. So it's entirely up to you guys whether if you decided to vote on something with that right turn lane or without it, because
Well, I think staff has to get back to us with whether or not that other date is even possible. And the 13th.
I think for right now, it's on the agenda, and it's going to stay there, and we can see what happens.
Yeah, it's on the agenda. I know Steve's the one who normally schedules a special meeting, so he can, if there's a date available, maybe we can do it the date available, whatever. But as everyone's saying here, if PennDOT says we got to put in a right turn lane, we got to put in a right turn lane, no matter what this board says or what this board recommends or what the Board of Commissioners says or recommends. So,
But as Amy said, PennDOT is influenced by the residents and the government.
We can also provide a statement from us on that. At our next meeting, we could propose something that would go forward, right? It's easier to have it in advance and then just vote on it, I think. The other question I have is the church walk plans. Is that something that's just further detail, or is that something else that we're providing a recommendation on?
The bridge is a requirement of the conditional use. It's really just a sidewalk plan. I don't believe there's really any issues to address. Roger's noted that he wants a little more information on where the bridge drains, but I don't know that there's anything to discuss on the bridge. We've showed the location, and we're replacing a sidewalk on top of another sidewalk, so we have to do some minor stormwater, and he wants some more information on where it drains, which we'll work through with him, but I don't know
Alex,
what there is to address.
the church walk is the tail and the dog. The dog is the traffic study, is Amy's letter. That's what we really need. But
Right.
besides that, the church walk has not been reviewed, that's all.
Well, Amy has her comment, we didn't go through Amy's letter, but Amy has the one comment about the location of Church Walk, and we did discuss that today with her, she and I, before this meeting, and, we've addressed those issues, and I think she's comfortable with its location, and PennDOT was the one that suggested that location, so.
Is this the drive?
The actual physical driveway. So I believe that issue's resolved with the location of, the bridge is where it has to be because it connects the church to the SEPTA overpass, and Amy's comfortable after our discussion today on where Church Walk is going.
So yes, we do
Church
need
walk
to
drive.
review it. Yes, we do. We are making a recommendation on a different plan that we have not yet discussed whatsoever. So that
And we
would
don't have-
probably occur at the next meeting, regardless of the traffic.
If I can add and maybe clear something up, let's take a step back, and you've looked at each one of these separate set of plans for each section. They're not actually separate land development plans you're looking at. This is supplemental information to the overall CICD land development for housing that you're reviewing. I required this additional information because the housing could not stand alone. So I wanted to see the parking garage, I wanted to see all of the parking and the phasing, and that's why they submitted. It's additional information. With the church walk section, my review will be minimal on that until down the road when we actually get structural drawings for the bridge itself. So as Alex mentioned, I had some drainage issues in one of the other sections of my letter asking how they were addressing that. But from my standpoint, there's not a huge review that's going to go on there. And it kind of is what it is. If Amy's comfortable with the location of that and the turning movements that go around that bridge, it is what it is, and it's going where it's going. So it doesn't really have an effect on the rest of the plan at all.
All that being said, I think the consensus that I'm picking up is that we're going to review Amy's, quote, real letter, and we might as well review your minor letter as to the church walk.
And I think we need the input from that neighborhood meeting
Right.
also. Yeah, and let me just mention in perspective, we have seen 6 and 8 house developments that have taken a year or more. This is one of the largest, if not the largest, development that Radnor Township is going to have or has had. And I think we really need to be careful about going through everything so we don't say down the road, oh, gee, I didn't realize that it was that way in the plan. So I understand that Villanova is frustrated because this is taking a long time. I think it was the CICD zoning that took so much time. The plans themselves, I don't think, have taken that amount of time considering the size and the scope of the development. But I really feel if we need an extra week or two to go through this, we need to take it because it is really going to affect the township down the road. And we only get one shot at the preliminary. If it's not in there and it's a substantial change, which could be depending if a road had to be widened or something, we may not be able to do it in the final.
We have enough time. We hold a meeting on the 7th. Could she get her act together so we could have a meeting on the 9th? Could Amy get her leader?
Oh, yeah, there is someone who wanted to make public comment. Let's do that first, and then we'll get back to that. No. Sorry to keep you waiting, but, we're not...
Tish Long, Alderman Lane. I have to agree with Kathy. I think patience is needed right now. On 2/28, Bob Zinkowski approved the PennDOT meeting. It took us until just this week to set on the date of April the 7th to meet with PennDOT. PennDOT has met with the applicant and with staff on many occasions and has yet to meet with the residents. We drive these streets, we live here. I think our input should be the most valuable. So I would really sincerely ask you to defer any discussion of traffic until after the meeting on the 7th with PennDOT. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jane Galley, and I live in the 7th Ward on Barclayton Road. I would like you guys to think about, didn't hear any discussion, I did come a little late, about sewage, raw sewage, speak of which, because the last time Villanova built the South Campus, my area, my DeBarron, ended up with 3.5 feet of raw sewage in the entire road of DeBarron. Because, we forgot about those dorms create sewage, and they didn't improve what was going on underneath the ground. And so I would ask you, please, as you said before, take your time, because we have to live with the results of what you do. And a lot of you don't live where we live, but we have to live with them. And I mean, I'm all for improvements and advancing things, but let's do it in a calm, slow, well thought out manner, and not just rush to judgment because they don't agree with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I heard, and maybe you can tell me if this is correct, that the majority of the sewage from this is going into Lower Merion. Is that correct?
We're required to get an Act 537 approval from DEP that estimates the sewage generated by this project and gets sign off from every municipality that receives it to prove that there's sufficient capacity in all their pipes. We're doing, Steve's not here, but we've been in long discussions with Steve about capacity issues in the township. We're currently metering flow on Villanova's campus, and we've been in discussions with Lower Merion as to whether or not we can take some existing flow out of the system, send it to Lower Merion to free up flow in the pipes. We acknowledge that we have to work through those details with DEP, and that permit is required, and we obviously have to obtain it.
That was the comment about the 247.
Right,
So
the
you already
537.
told us you would comply. Yes, we knew that.
We
Thank
need
you.
to prove there's sufficient flow for capacity for the flow we generate.
Okay, I'm going to suggest two things. One is we can't pick a second meeting on the spot because Steve calls that. I would like board members to say if they're available within the first 2 weeks of April, generally speaking, in addition to the official monthly meeting. And so you can head nod or just say yes.
I already have a meeting on the 9th for the Stormwater Advisory Committee,
Well, see,
so I can't make a 9th meeting.
Pardon me, is the PennDOT meeting during the day or at night? Thank you.
okay. All right, are you, Elizabeth? Okay. All right, well, what we should do then, when Stephen can do that, is send us 2 or 3 days, and as we did before, say, I can make this or I can't make that. And Steve can weigh in, Steve Cooper can weigh in if he feels strongly for or against that meeting. For now, I guess we leave the meeting on the April agenda, and if we schedule a separate meeting with the consent of the applicant, we'll move Villanova off the top of that first, meeting of April to this, their special meeting. So would anyone like to make a motion for tonight? I don't think we have to put that in a,
I would just move that we table the,
yeah,
we table or continue the application.
okay. Second?
I second.
Is anybody,
Amend that so we say that we're going to have a meeting?
No.
no. I don't think we have to do that. Because if we don't schedule a second meeting, then they're at the top of the agenda the first Monday of April. All right, all those in favor of continuing? Aye. Aye. Opposed? No, okay. All right. Yeah, well,
Thank you again for your patience, everybody.
any
Good meeting.
Any old business, any new business?
Yes. No, new business. I'm so sorry. I do have a request. In respect for our really hard worker, Sue Jones, and the environment, can we ask that Planning Commission members are okay with Sue, when she sends us a paper copy of a packet, just sending us the most recent report? When we get January and February and March printed again and again and again every month, we don't need that. We don't need her spending her time doing that. Are we okay with that?
I think
Yeah,
we're all
we're
okay with that.
And
And if we have anything we're missing, we can ask.
Replaces.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you, Sue. So
I'll second that.
adjourned.
Adjourned.